We seem to be echoing.
Lovely.
Yeah.
I'll confirm when we're live. Hold on a minute. Okay, we are live, so over to you, Councillor Scott.
I'd like to say good evening to everyone, to the teeming millions that we're positive are tuning into this evening's North Area Committee. This is the first North Area Committee meeting since the election of May this year. So we welcome all the councillors to this meeting, and we'll go around and introduce ourselves shortly, because there are new councillors and we need to remember who all our councillors are. But before we commence, I would like to read out the rules and instructions that we are to follow in this proceeding, because we are on Teams. The information for the public is as follows, and these are the details of how to observe the committee meeting. They are published no later than 24 hours before the meeting, so I trust that all those who are interested in North Area Committee read the details recently, and that's the reason that you're on. Any person who participates in the meeting in accordance with the Council's public speaking time is deemed to have consented to being recorded and to the use of those images where participating via video conference and or sound recordings for webcast purposes. When speaking, members of the public should not disclose any personal information of any individual, as this might infringe the rights of that individual and breach the Data Protection Act. Data protection is absolutely essential. If members of the public wish to address the committee, please contact Democratic Services, that is Democratic Services in the City Council, by 12 noon, 2 working days before the meeting. And that means then you'd be registered as a public speaker and your questions will be put to councillors, to the North Area Committee. Questions can be submitted throughout the meeting also to Democratic Services at cambridge.gov.uk. So that's democratic.services at cambridge.gov.uk. So anytime during the meeting a member of the public has a question, she or he can email that question to Democratic Services at that email address I just gave. And we will endeavour to respond to the questions during the discussion on the relevant agenda item. If we run out of time, a response will be provided to members of the public outside the meeting and will be published on the relevant area committee meeting webpage. So it will be on our North Area Committee webpage. For full information about committee meetings, committee reports, councillors and the democratic process, please go to, there's guidance for how to join virtual committees run via Microsoft Teams, and that URL is on the Cambridge City website, and the website is http://democracy.cambridge.gov.uk. You can email at, I repeat the email address, which is democratic.services@cambridge.gov.uk, and the phone number there is 01 223 457 000, 01 223 457 000. So now those are the messages and the instructions that we're required to give before commencing the proceedings. And now I see that one of our guests, Lillian Rundblad, has her hand up, so I'll ask Lillian, you have a question.
What I do have a problem, rather. I cannot send you a question. I already have reported that to Sarah Steve earlier today. I do have comments to the minutes regarding the questions that were asked last meeting from HRA, and also, of course, later on, but I cannot send you an email. I cannot do that. So could I read the questions later on at the appropriate place?
Yes, when we come to that item on the agenda. Thank you, Lillian Rundblad. Thank you. So now I'd like to do a formal welcome and introduction and apologies for absence. So I'm Jocelyn Scott and I'm a City Councillor for West Chesterton, and I'm chairing this meeting of North Area Committee, and I'd like then to introduce my fellow councillors. And now I should ask, does everybody know where they come in the alphabet? You surely must. And do you know where you come in the alphabet in relation to others? Because if that's so, then it will be a good idea for each of you to introduce yourselves in accordance with the alphabet. Are people happy to proceed in that manner? I'll ask, does anybody's name begin with A? What about B? C?
Yes,
D?
Chair. Yes, Chair.
Good.
B.
C. Oh, B, absolutely. Bird, please. Please go ahead, Jerry. Councillor Bird.
Thank you. Councillor Jerry Bird for East Chesterton and for County Council. Thanks,
Thank
Chair.
you. Thank you, Councillor Bird. Who comes after Councillor Bird?
I suspect that might be me, Chair.
Yes. Councillor Carling, thank you.
I'm a City Councillor for West Chesterton, and due to bandwidth issues, I'm afraid my camera's going to have to stay off for most of the meeting today.
Thank you, Councillor Carling, one of our new members of the North Area Committee. Does anybody begin with D? C, D.
I believe that would be me.
Oh, good.
Okay, so I'm Councillor Divkovic, Eva. I am a councillor for Arbury.
Great. And Eva Divkovic is another of our new councillors, as she said, for Arbury. So welcome. And what about A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I?
Hang on, G.
Oh, absolutely. Councillor Gawthorpe Wood.
Hello, so I'm Jenny Gawthorpe Wood, City Councillor for King's Hedges. Thank you.
Thank you. H, I, J, K, L, M, Machini.
There you go. First, yeah, McQueen and then Maschini.
Oh, good.
Carla McQueen, City Councillor for East Chesterton Ward.
Thank you, Councillor McQueen. Of course, the MCs always come first in M's. Good. And now to Councillor Machini.
Elisa Maschini, County Councillor, King's Hedges, and clearly not clever enough to play this game. I'm really sorry.
I know. I'm thinking I'll have to make a list in the future. So we're up to M, LMN, N, O, P, Q, Kathy Ray, Councillor Ray. Yes.
I'm jumping in one letter ahead of you. Kathy Ray, I'm the councillor for Castle. So as a small part of Castle is in North Area.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Councillor Ray. S, Councillor Smart, I can see you.
Yeah, hello. So I'm one of the councillors in King's Hedges, Martin Smart. That's it really, I guess. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smart.
Now it's me. It's Richard Swift, one of the councillors for West Chesterton.
Good. And welcome, Councillor Swift, a new member of the North Area Committee. T. Yes, Councillor Beju Tatakavaki. Are you going to be T or are you going to be V, Councillor?
Yeah, we. I'm Councillor Baiju Titala Warki. My name is a pretty long name. I used to, they used to address me as Baiju Titala, but then I had a problem with my professional practice, so the Law Society advised me to keep my long name, Baiju Titala Warki. I'm East Chesterton councillor, newly elected, though I was a councillor for some time, and back in again. Apology, I have a technical problem with my laptop, so I'm joining over the phone. So most of the time I'll be off the camera. Thank you.
Good. Thank you to Councillor and welcome back to North Area Committee. And now I can see it's Councillor Todd Jones.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, Mike Todd Jones, City Councillor for Arbury. Thanks.
Thank you. So have we done it? T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. That's the lot. And so there are some apologies. Oh, wait a minute. We should allow the officers. Could the officers please introduce themselves as well? So I'm sorry, I should have invited you to do so. So perhaps if you introduce yourselves now, officers.
Hi, I'm Sarah Steed, the committee manager for the meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Steed. And I can see that, is Karen Jarley an officer or is Karen Jarley a resident who's asking a question? You're an officer, Karen.
Yeah,
I'm
hi,
sorry.
I'm Karen Jally. I'm the Community Safety Manager at City Council. And for those of you who haven't met me before, it's because I joined quite recently, so 5 months into my role. Nice to meet
Right.
you.
Thank you and welcome to North Area Committee, Ms. Jarley. Good. And any other officers that we have? Yes, Tom Eck.
Yep, good evening everyone. I'm an anti-social behaviour officer, part of the community safety team. I recently joined the job as well at the end of March, so I'm very new and this is my first committee meeting.
Good. Welcome, Mr. Eck. Good. And I know that we've got Mr. Clift, Gary Clift, who's in the background doing all the magic in terms of the transmission. Did you want to introduce yourself, Mr. Clift? He might
Hello
not be
everyone,
able.
I'm Gary Cliff, Democratic Services Manager at the City Council, doing the producing for this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And any other officers? Yep.
That's it, Chair, for the moment.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you. And I know that we've got some residents on as well, and we'll come to you when we come to your questions. So, and thank you very much for coming and for your questions in advance. Now, apologies. I know that we have apologies from Councillor Collis. And was there another apology, Mrs. Steed?
Chair, I'm not aware of any other apologies.
No, good. So,
yeah, I think it was just Councillor Collis, Chair.
Good. Thank you. And now declarations of interest. Does anybody have...
Chair, do you have apologies from Councillor Cox-Condren?
Oh.
Councillor do actually, Chair. She said she might be late. That's what she said to me.
Right, okay. Well, we'll await Councillor Cox-Condren and put her down as an apology if it's not possible for her to come. And Councillor Gorstrop Wood has a question.
Is Councillor Shield?
Yes, Councillor Patrick Shield. He has been suffering from COVID, I know that.
Yeah, I think his apologies should be accepted.
Right, we'll accept Councillor Shield's apologies too. And thank you, Councillor Gorstrop Wood. So, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No. And now,
Chair, item number 5. I don't know whether I haven't. I have to declare something, but this is item number 5. Policing and safer neighborhood. As I said, I don't know whether I have to declare. I am just declaring it for just to protect myself. I am working as a criminal defense lawyer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tataka Vaki. Thank you. And now we have the minutes of the last meeting. I'm accepting that everybody's read the minutes of the last meeting. And are there any amendments that need to be made? I understand you have one, Mrs. Rumblad.
Yes, I do have some additional information regarding what was said on pages 4, 5, and 6. So this has now been moved forward. HRR invited Paul AGM, and he gave an update regarding the details of the various complaints. So the requested there is a 3 audit, the so-called as-built survey information is now packaged together with WSP, and it has been submitted to the road safety team. So it's progress. We also were promised confirmations that all our concerns will be dealt with. And in fact, measurement is already been amended, putting steel ties on instead of the soft plastic garden ties. So the contract with the subcontractor of landscaping, it ends in October 2022. And all the details with trees and things like that will be done.
I think there's some difficulty with your microphone, unless it's my hearing. But I'll tell you what, Mrs. Rumblad, perhaps the point would be, I know that you can't email at the present time, but perhaps if you'd email later these amendments to the minutes, and we'll accept the minutes subject to your statement of the need for an amendment to them. I think that's perhaps the best way to deal with it, because there does seem to be some difficulty with your microphone at the moment.
That is acceptable, but it will take maybe a week because I might have to buy a new computer. It's almost broken. But that is okay.
Yeah, and if you require assistance in that, I don't mean to buy a new computer, but I mean if you need some assistance in terms of scribing, we can address that. Thank you. So now we go to the next item on the agenda, which is the committee action sheet, and this appears on the agenda pack from pages 11 to 12. Now there is an update that I would just like to give. I'm just going to 11 and 12. For some considerable time, there's been an item on this action sheet in relation to some rather large potholes on Arbury Road footpaths. And there was a resident who drew attention to the fact that it was dangerous because water accumulated in these potholes. But to come to the quick end of my large recitation or long recitation, they've been fixed. And I had understood that they'd be fixed when the Milton Road project was concluded, but fortunately they've been fixed already. So that's an item on the action sheet. But does anybody, other member, have any update on the action sheet? Yes, I see somebody's got a hand up. Yes, thank you. Councillor Bird, excellent.
Thanks, Chair. It's number 2 on page 11. I haven't heard anything from Network Rail regarding the discussion we had at that meeting. So not very happy about that, Chair, because it's a very important issue.
That was the issue about the Fen Road crossing.
Yes.
Or alternative road or bridge.
Yeah.
Well, what we'll have to do is follow that up. So we'll make sure that we follow that up, Councillor Bird, and thank you for drawing that to attention. I think we all agree it's a significant issue.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. So are there any other matters to draw to attention on the North Area Committee action sheet? No, I take that everything's all right. And I can see that we've been joined by Councillor Hilary Cox-Condren. Councillor Condren, could you just introduce yourself, because we've been around introducing ourselves and it's good to see you.
Thank you so much. Apologies, everybody, that I'm late joining. I was at an event and I've just returned, so huge apologies for that. I'm Councillor Hilary Cox-Condren. I am Arbury Ward.
Good.
Lovely to be with you all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Now, is that one of your paintings in the background?
This is a painting of done by a neighbour who recently passed away, elderly neighbour, and yeah, I picked up one of his paintings as a.
It's really beautiful, and it looks beautiful against the back of the blue wall. Yeah, thank you. Good. And so now we then come to the next item on the agenda, which is policing and safe neighbourhoods. So may we introduce the officer or officers who are leading us through on that agenda item, policing and safer neighbourhoods. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. My name is Sergeant Sean Ems. I'm the Neighbourhood Sergeant for North of Cambridge, covering Arbury, King's Edges, East and West Chesterton. Apologies, I also have issues with my camera today. I'm not entirely sure why you can't see me, but hopefully you can hear me. Can I just have confirmation you can? Lovely. Thank you very much. Would you like for me to go through my part now and then we can hear from Mr. Eek, or would you like Mr. Eek to introduce himself first?
Mr. Eek's introduced himself, so perhaps if you present your report and then we'll come to Mr. Eek too. Thank you.
No problem, thank you very much. So at the last North Area Committee meeting that police were involved directly with, we had a number of concerns that were raised. These were antisocial behaviour and dangerous driving across the north of the city, particularly including Fen Road and High Street, and also the issue of NOS canisters, NO2, which is a nitrous oxide. The next concern was street-based drug dealing, including cuckooing, and then we had youth and knife crime. So if I go from the top, and I'll go back to ASB and dangerous driving. So for the last probably 12 to 18 months, the North team has put together an operation to try and reduce incidences of antisocial behaviour and antisocial driving and dangerous driving across the north of the city. This initially started solely on the Fen Road area, but has slowly been rolled out across the north, and now in fact is working across the city with other areas being involved. It's all worked under the name of Operation Staple. Local officers continue to target locations of concern as highlighted by the community. So where we get reports in from residents and people who work within the areas, we take those to ascertain where we need to be. As reported at the previous meeting, we've also had the introduction of a Safer Speeds team. This is made up of special constables who give up their time to give back to the community. They are solely tasked as an additional resource to target key locations where speeding has been identified as a problem. In addition to that, we've worked with the Environmental Health Enforcement team to tackle areas identified as being subject to the dumping of rubbish, specifically NOS canisters. And where these areas are identified, we also increase patrols to try and prevent vehicles gathering. The current situation is we continue with Staple. We continue to carry out patrols in these highlighted areas. This year alone, we've issued Section 59 notices against drivers and vehicles. These notices warn them against their behaviour and the manner of their driving, and also let the driver know that if their behaviour continues, then their vehicle could be seized. We've issued traffic offence reports on a regular basis for numerous offences, including the use of mobile phones whilst driving, not wearing seatbelts, and other road-related offences such as failing to insure or not having a valid MOT. Further to this, where insurance offences or Section 59 offences allow, the team are seizing at least one vehicle a week for these road traffic offences, so it's 4 vehicles a month. Moving on to street-based drug dealing, including cuckooing. Again, we continue to scan reports via all channels. These can be online reports directly to the police. They can be through phone calls or word of mouth whilst we're on patrol. We also work with the council ASB team who provide us with information to help us identify people and locations that we can target our resources at. We tend to tackle these either via enforcement, education, or through partnership working where applicable. Whilst a priority for the community of those living and working in North Cambridge, tackling drug dealing and county lines remains a priority for Cambridgeshire Constabulary as a whole. In fact, we have a dedicated county lines team who work across the county, and where we believe they are necessary, we can bid for their support in particular jobs. The North team alone have carried out just under 60 stop searches this year. That's resulted in approximately 20 arrests for drug-related offences, including 10 arrests for drug supply. We've carried out 4 warrants this year at various addresses, and we've seized over £9,000 worth of drugs from the streets. We've also seized a reasonable amount of cash, certainly 5 figures of cash that's been involved as a consequence of drug dealing. Youth and knife crime, again, not just a concern in the north, but a force-wide issue. Since the last meeting, the North team have developed and implemented Operation Proximity. There is a force-wide Operation Guardian, which was trialled within the north. It's now a citywide policing plan to tackle knife crime in Cambridge City. So the aims of Proximity are to make positive interventions in young persons' lives and what could be their most vulnerable times, to increase the intelligence we have around young persons, particularly around how they begin their journey into knife carrying or serious street-based violence or criminally exploited children. We protect individuals from harm and being led into a life of crime and serious street-based violence. We try to prevent future harm coming to the community as a whole by lowering the number of incidents involving knives, and also to help families manage their own risks where family members are carrying knives. We aim to build trust in the community and families affected by knife crime in the constabulary. And we're looking to reduce the number and severity of knife crime, therefore lowering the demand on other resources at the front line. We're doing this through preventative strategies and interventions, part of which is building better relationships with schools, youth organisations, partners, and the safeguarding leads within them. So the current situation is Proximity began in February 2022 with a cohort of juveniles who had been identified at risk carrying knives. Those juvenile cohort were then graded on a emerging, moderate or significant risk as being at harm. Of those cohort juveniles, 4 were placed in the significant category, i.e. those at most at risk of either carrying knives or being involved in knife crime. And since then, we carried out a total of 37 interventions with those individuals. These have ranged from school visits by officers where presentations have been given not just to those individuals, but also to their year groups. We've worked with educational establishments and parents to do home visits. We've also interacted with individuals on the street to let them know that they are of note to the police, and we are particularly concerned around their behaviour involving knives. From that first cohort, 3 have been removed as being no longer of a significant risk, as their behaviour has changed enough for us to not be so concerned about them. 3 of the moderates have moved up to significant, and a further 2 juveniles have been added straight into significant. In March, as a result of the work done on Proximity, 1 juvenile was stopped and searched in the area of Nuns Way and was found in possession of a large knife as well as a quantity of drugs. He was arrested and was, at the time of writing this, in prison following being convicted of being in possession of the offensive weapon and drugs. This work is ongoing and has been rolled across the city, and now each neighbourhood team takes ownership of individuals residing in their area, with those at most significant risk being allocated an individual officer to deal with them. In terms of proactive work and emerging issues, we've continued with our online consultation meetings. The most recent one was held on Tuesday of this week, and the next one will be on Tuesday, the 6th of September. Further event, sorry, I've missed a bit there. So the last event took place in February with residents from across the city attending, being able to speak directly to officers from their local neighbourhood teams. The concerns raised at the time were also drugs and cycle crime, as well as antisocial behaviour, noisy vehicles and visibility of police officers. Those were addressed in that meeting, and further concerns this time remain drugs, crime prevention, as well as visibility. Does anybody have any questions for me? This is the point where you all put your hands up.
Oh, yes, Councillor Bird and Councillor Todd Jones. 3. Councillor Bird, then Councillor Todd Jones, then Councillor Tatala Vaki, and then we also have a question from, we've got many. Well, let's have those first 3. Sorry, the first 3 I named. We'll have those questions, and then we'll come to Sergeant Ems. Councillor Bird.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Sergeant Ems. Just a couple of things about the issues around East Chesterton. As you said about the canisters and antisocial behaviour, we have a lot of canisters and antisocial behaviour at Nutfield Road Business Park Friday night and Saturday nights. we've seen people hanging about on the park on Green End Road, waiting for a car to turn up for their drugs. This is in the evening. Also on Franks Lane, we've seen a young guy on a moped with a phone in hand, waiting for the car to turn up for the drugs. And also they're parking in Bramley Court and Laxton Way near the school. So it's very serious at the moment in East Chesterton with these issues about the drug dealing, Sergeant Eames, and also about the antisocial behaviour. Seems like the young youths are getting in a lot of trouble at the moment. And I have spoken to somebody in community development about it, because I have a real concern about it. And I don't know if you have a concern about the youths too. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Councillor Bird. And if you can just take a note of that, Sergeant Eames, and we'll come to Councillor Todd Jones, and then we'll come to Councillor Baiju Tataki Vaki, and then we'll come to Sergeant Eames. So please, Councillor Todd Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks again, Sergeant Eames, for the presentation. Just wanted to pick up on a couple of things in Arbury. It's related to one of the current objectives, and I really appreciate that this is a citywide objective. This is street-based drug dealing, but I'm aware of a couple of hotspots in Arbury at the moment, and I've been working quite closely with PC Ed Payne, who's been very helpful and supportive, I kind of just want to record my appreciation of that, but also to stress that I'd very much like to see the street-based drug dealing as a local priority, appreciating that it's a citywide priority as well, and I hope that will continue. Thanks.
Good. Thanks, Councillor Todd Jones. Now to Councillor Tataki Vaki. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Sergeant Eames. You have mentioned that you had 60 stop and search. Could you just clarify as to whether any Section 60 stop and search were used in Cambridge at all? And the second question, could you just give us some sort of an idea? What is the frequency of police patrolling in East Chesterton, if there is any kind of number of patrolling you usually conduct in this area, especially bearing in mind the fact that the Friend Road traffic issues? Thank you.
So over to you, Councillor. Sorry, Sergeant Eames. Over to you.
Thank you. I was furiously scribbling. I hope I haven't missed anything. So going back to Councillor Bird, Nuffield Road, NOS canisters, Friday, Saturday nights, collection of vehicles. Thank you very much. We are aware that that is an issue area when we're on duty. That does form part of our patrol area. I will try and ensure that we get there as often as possible. I'm on a slightly reduced staffing at the moment, so I'm probably not going to be out as much as I would like us to be out, but we will certainly look at that as a particular area. I don't know if that's being reported by residents. The problem is, if we wait until we come to an area committee meeting to be told of these things, then it looks like we're not doing anything for a very long period of time. If I can ask that you request that your constituents do report things, online reporting is one way to do it. They can just come onto our website, they can fill in the form, and then we will see that. It's much more time efficient than ringing 101 for something that is not an emergency. So that's NOS canisters, Nuffield Road. I'm sorry I've forgotten the location for the second one about drug dealing with a car. Could you just tell me what that location was again?
Yes, it was on the Green End Road Park. The people are waiting there, waiting for the car to turn up, which is either in Bramley Court, Laxton Way, and then you've got the moped in Franks Lane.
Right, lovely. Okay, that's fantastic. Again, if that's happening, if people can report it, and if at all possible, if they can give me a car make, model, colour, and in an absolutely perfect world, a number plate from it, then I can look to target that vehicle specifically, and then I don't even have to look at getting it whilst it's in situ. I can look at getting it wherever it is. Same with the moped, if at all possible, a description of the moped or the rider, and ideally an index number, the number plate. Then I can actually proactively go and look for it rather than waiting for it to turn up. So you've made me aware that it's Green End Road Park, Franks Lane, Bramley Court and Laxton Way. As that's so close to Nuffield Road, we will include all of that whilst we're out and about. But yeah, ideally, if we can have specific descriptions, then it makes it a lot easier for me to try and tackle that vehicle and those people. When they're not just in that area, I can look for them elsewhere. And then was that in relation to overall antisocial behaviour in that area as well?
Yeah, it was the youths that we're worried about as well.
Yeah, and is that just gatherings of them, or are they doing anything in particular?
Yeah, there's been problems down Brownsfield Community Centre and other areas in the ward.
Yeah, the Brownsfield community area I know about. There are ongoing investigations around that, and work is ongoing with schools to try and identify the culprits around that. So I know that one is well in hand. I'm of the opinion that that group is probably the same group who are causing problems in the entire area. So if we can get them identified through the schools and tackle them, then that should help, not necessarily put a stop to it, but certainly reduce those instances.
And then it was drugs and Councillor Todd Jones.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Todd Jones. I think you're probably Ed's biggest fan. I think you probably tell me every meeting how good he is. You'll be pleased to know he's still with us. You'll be pleased to know that he's still working hard, doing everything he can for his local community. In terms of drugs remaining a local priority, then obviously that's going to be, I'm going to be led by you guys. I'm not going to tell you what we're going to concentrate on. But if that's one of the priorities that gets set, then yeah, of course, we'll be more than happy to continue that in the North area.
Okay, thanks, Sean.
No problem. And then Councillor Vitala Verki. So your first question around Section 60, there's a really, really easy answer for you. I'm not aware of Section 60 ever being done in Cambridgeshire, particularly in Cambridge City, and it's certainly not been done in the last reporting period.
And then there was a general question about stop and search, I believe, Councillor Tataki.
No, sorry, that was about stop and search, Section 60 stop and search. I think the other one was about frequency of patrols in East Chesterton.
Oh, that's right, sorry.
Yeah. I can't give you a figure because our day-to-day work is led by whatever the relevant threat, risk and harm is within whatever we come into. So overall, we have a plan to tackle things like antisocial behaviour, antisocial driving, street-based drug dealing and youth and knife crime. We have overall plans that we try to action. We put them in place and we decide that we're going to, on whatever particular day. So, for example, tomorrow has been designated as an ops staple day. The entire team will be doing nothing but traffic work for the entire day. So how that pans out into determining how often a police car is in a particular area, I can't give you an answer to that, I'm afraid, because of the nature of how we work. In addition, we have response departments who are answering calls for service. There is no way for me to predict where they're going to be needed. They just go to where the calls come from. If some of those are in and around Fen Road, then they will be seen in Fen Road as they're going to a job or they're coming back from a job. But again, I can't give you dates, times, anything like that in terms of how often we're there and for how long.
Good. Thanks so much, Sergeant Ems. And now we come to our second round of questions, and it's Councillor Moschini, then Councillor Gorthrop Wood, then Mrs. Lillian Runblad. So please, Councillor Moschini.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you. Hello, Sergeant Ems. Thank you very much for coming. I've had quite a few people recently, which is unusual for me. I've had quite a few people complain to me that they've seen an increase in sort of car-related crime, I suppose you might call it. This is when the cars get broken into, either just broken into or broken into to steal something that's inside them. And they're basically complaining that there's nothing, like they report the crime, but the police say that there's nothing they can do, and they find this quite unsatisfactory. So I was wondering, can we do anything for that kind of crime, sort of damaged property, lost property, stolen property? And what can we do? What are we doing that we can do? And is there anything more that we can do to sort of give people a bit of an investigation if there's any capacity for it?
Thank you, Councillor. And now to Councillor Gawthorpe Wood.
I'm also representing King's Hedges. I mean, it's very concerning, but I'm glad you did pick up the juvenile with the knife in Nuns Way. What I wondered is if you could give a picture of how King's Hedges is looking like compared to, say, East Chesterton and the other wards, Arbury particularly. I mean, I'm getting more of the sort of ASBO vandalism, noisy bikes, and we're coming to summer, so no doubt this will start to get worse again, reports. But also I wondered, you know, how presumably you're working in North Area Academy, but I did wonder if you can say a bit more about that and the number of families that you're working with. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Councillor Gawthorpe Wood. And now to Mrs. Lillian Rundblad.
Yes, we have good news, and this is regarding Speedwatch. We have earlier requested to have Speedwatch kits coming to us. We have formed a group, and we have been contacted by Amanda Large that we will receive our own kit that we can use whenever it is necessary to check the 20 miles per hour speed limits on Histon Road. That was very fortunate. So thank you very much for the help.
Good. Thank you. Now over to you, Sergeant Ems.
Thank you. Okay, so Councillor Moschini, car-related crime has been reported as increasing. I don't have the facts and figures in front of me. What I can tell you is, yes, earlier this year there was a whole series of theft from motor vehicles in that area. They all happened in fairly quick succession. They were all down to one person who we located, we arrested, they went to court and they went to prison. Once they were in prison, we further identified some more offences in the area that they were responsible for. They have subsequently been charged with those as well. So, whilst it's a terrible thing to have to put up with, where it has happened, I sort of take exception when it's said that the police do nothing and we just record it and then file it. In some cases, sadly, that is true, where we don't identify an offender. But in the majority of the ones that happened earlier this year, certainly, then I think we got those wrapped up. If any individual residents want to have got a particular complaint about their individual investigation, then they are entitled to request a review of the investigation. If they look up victim right to review on the Cambridge Police website, then they can look up the process of how to do that if they're not happy with the way an investigation has taken place, if they're not happy with the way it's been run. I can't promise that it will change any results, but there is a mechanism there to make a complaint about an individual investigation.
Thank you. Thanks, Sergeant Eck. And now we have a question from Councillor Cox-Condren, and then I have a couple of issues that I'd like to raise, Sergeant Ems, and then we'll come back to you for responses to those, and then we'll go to our community safety team. So, Councillor Cox-Condren, thank you.
Sorry.
Thanks so much.
Sorry, can I just respond to Councillor Gawthorpe Woods?
Oh, I beg your pardon. I'm so sorry. I'm so busy looking at my list here. And yeah, I beg your pardon, both to you and to Councillor Gorstrop Wood. Sorry.
No problem. So, Councillor Gorthrop Wood, you've asked me how does knife crime relate in King's Hedges to other wards. Again, off the top of my head, I don't have facts and figures in front of me. I can certainly look that up and I can give you a response around that. So if you leave that with me, I can send the figures to you directly. And then I think the second one was about North Area Academy and the number of families we're working with in relation to knife crime. Is that correct?
More or less, and sort of more generally. This might be for Karen as well.
Yeah, okay. So in short, if I quickly look up my figures. So I referred, when I spoke about it earlier, I referred to a cohort of individuals. The reality is when it comes to North Cambridge Academy, not many of my cohort have anything to do with that school. A lot of the ones I deal with are in additional educational provision. But to give you an idea of numbers, for the north of the city, I am dealing with not many. 3 individuals who I would put in the significant harm band. So that's across the entirety of the north. So that's King's Hedges, Arbury, East and West Chesterton. So I've currently got 3 individuals that I'm concerned about. I think that covers it.
Good. Thank you. Now over to you, Councillor Cox-Condren.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sergeant Ems. I've got a couple of questions, if I may. You mentioned bike theft a little bit. I just wondered if you could elaborate on that a little bit more, please. Looking online, it sounds like there's been more arrests recently, which is great. But I also wondered about people buying stolen bikes, and what prevention there is for that as well, and the impact that has in, that people are part of the cycle too, and just what's happening there. The other was also about North Cambridge Academy, and I've been doing some work there, and I also work with our domestic violence team at county, and it's I think around 1/3 of the families, pupils are from families where there have been instances of domestic abuse reported already, which is quite a high number. I think it's about 3 times higher than they'd expect. And obviously that impacts on young people as well. I just wondered what collaborative work we could be doing there as well. If there's any thoughts, I don't know if that would be with community safety, but I'd be interested in discussing that further as well to support any work that we could do in collaboration, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cox-Condren. Now, I actually have one leading on from Councillor Cox-Condren's comments about the bicycles, because we in West Chesterton have received a really disturbing report about some residents who were walking along the Cam path near the Lido there, or Lido, depends how one wants to pronounce it. And what happened was, the lighting is rather dark there, and I'm following that up with the council. But suddenly, out of nowhere, came a cyclist on an electrical bike, and of course the electrical bikes make no noise. And the cyclist was dressed all in black, with wearing one of those, masks with just the eyes showing, a balaclava. And suddenly, fortunately, he was able to stop the bike in time, came to a screeching halt. But their feelings were, first of all, shock and distress because of the possibility of a collision. But secondly, it appears that there is some gang activity on Jesus Green, and we've heard about this before. of persons who allegedly are taking bikes that don't belong to them, and the residents believe that that may be evidence of it. So that if you could speak about this alleged gang activity on Jesus Green, because I've been in a discussion with one of your officers about this and the possibility that a CCTV camera would be put on the building on the corner of Carlisle Road, Chesterton Road and Chesterton Lane, the building that offers employment opportunities to people who are suffering from unemployment. And I wonder whether the CCTV camera's been put up there. It wouldn't be any help for this part of the passageway. But that's number one. Now, number two is just the drugs again on Hilda Street, in particular in West Chesterton, in the Castle County area, is a concern. And then the issue of scooters and bicycles and so forth, not electric bicycles on the footpaths, is raising concern in a number of areas. And then finally, the issue of Midsummer Common. And when there are festivals and so on there, we appreciate, first of all, the rights of people to enjoy themselves on Midsummer Common. That's absolutely crucial. But also we appreciate the police being engaged in patrolling to ensure that everybody is safe and cared for. But back to Councillor Cox-Condren's issues and to mine on the Jesus Green and the bicycle issue as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so cycle crime in general across the city we know is very high. Lots of people feel that the police don't do enough to tackle it, that we're not interested, that we record it and we file it. The reality is cycle crime is the only crime trend in Cambridge City that has a monthly meeting between people who represent the cycling community and the superintendent. He is the area commander and he has a monthly meeting with this group to discuss cycle crime and to discuss what we're doing about it and what can be done to reduce it. In addition to that, I know that the city centre team run an operation solely focused on cycle theft. They have one officer dedicated to that whose pretty much full-time work is dealing with cycle crime. We arrest cycle thieves with disturbing regularity. Where we get those cycle thieves to court, we apply for criminal behaviour orders to further restrict their ongoing offending. So we will impose conditions such as not to be in possession of any bicycle or bicycle parts without proof of ownership, various conditions like that. The reason for seeking these orders at court, which is what these people get when they're released, is a lot of people think, oh, you've just given them an order, what's that going to do? The reality is it actually does more than the original offence. So if a cycle thief is sent to court for stealing a bicycle, the reality is they're going to get a fine. If we can get a CBO applied to them at the same time to have conditions not to be in possession of any future bicycles, they just have to be with a bicycle to breach that condition. That means they are arrestable solely for that. The bicycle might not even be stolen, but if they've not abided by the terms of the criminal behaviour order, they have breached the court's order. That means they will be arrested. That means they'll be taken to court for breaching that order. The courts generally take an incredibly dim view of anybody who ignores the will of the court. So, for example, there are, I think, 3 cycle thieves alone this year who've been given CBOs. Of those, one of them has breached it. He's ended up with a prison sentence for breaching that CBO, which is, in effect, far more of a punitive measure than he would have got for stealing the bicycle in the first place. If we move on to the people who facilitate the theft of these bicycles and perhaps buy them and sell them on, we are very aware that there are individuals that are named on a Facebook group with regularity. This causes us a number of evidential issues, which actually makes it tricky for us to successfully prosecute. However, we have arrested 3 separate people for handling stolen bikes in the north, 2 in the north and 1 outside of the city this year so far. Those investigations are ongoing. They will be looking at much more serious crimes. We are looking at conspiracy crimes, which tend to result in much heavier penalties should the guilt be found of them. But again, it's long-term work. Unfortunately, we don't work in the days of, a TV cop program where everything's wrapped up in 30 or 60 minutes. This takes a very long time. It's very time intensive to gather the evidence. So all I can say to you is if you can report back to your constituents that we do take it seriously, we take it hugely seriously, so much so that the work that we are doing, cycle crime has actually reduced over the last 3 years. Sorry, Councillor Cox-Condren.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to immediately say it then. Just,
right.
But I can do. Thank you. Just saying, were you saying about the meetings and about us reporting back? I think that's really that would be a really positive thing for us to be able to do. I'd really appreciate those updates or anything that you'd like us to take back to our communities. I think that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, it's really good to be able to share that.
I do have a presentation that I gave on Tuesday evening. I've tried to find it. I can't find it at the moment, but I've got various stats, and I think it's something like a 20 or 30% reduction in cycle crime over the last couple of years. Now, taking into account that obviously 2021 and 2020 were COVID issues, so lots of crime reduced anyway. Taking that out of it, we're actually still lower than pre-COVID levels. So, it's going in the right direction. Right, that's fine.
Can I just ask a question, Justin? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, Sergeant Eames is still responding to the earlier questions. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Sergeant Eames.
No problem. If it's about bikes, it's probably just as well to get it out now.
Shall I? Yeah. I go for a walk along the river each evening, and quite regularly we see someone just cycling along carrying another bike over their shoulder. And it looks incredibly suspicious, but we have no idea whether that's a bicycle thief or how are these bicycles stolen? Do they put in vans, or are they put over someone's shoulder on another bicycle and cycled along the river bank?
A whole variety of ways and means, from simply walking up to a bicycle, getting on it and riding away, to yes, there are rumours, but I'm not aware of this being confirmed, that there are gangs of people bringing vans up and filling them up with bicycles. I've certainly never seen any evidence of that. To opportunistic people who may be on a bicycle, see another unlocked one and will grab that as well. So my tutor once said to me, if it looks wrong, it's probably wrong. So, if it looks a little bit suspicious, the chances are it is suspicious, then it may be worth reporting. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah. Yes, thanks. Yes, thank you.
No problem. So I think Councillor Cox-Condren's next thing was around domestic violence and any collaborative work. Certainly, as one of the force priorities, domestic violence, we put a huge amount of time and effort into this. Are you aware of the multi-agency group, so MASH? Yeah, so...
Sorry, I thought you were talking about a different group then. I don't think I do know MASH, actually.
So within the police force, we have a multi-agency group who sit together, who look at things like all of our domestic violence reports, all of our risk assessments, and they work in hand with others to try and help both victims and perpetrators to reduce their behaviour. We struggle with evidential-led investigations. Sometimes, victims don't want to support, but we're using all sorts of ways and means. So we use domestic violence protection orders and domestic violence protection notices. They're issued against perpetrators even when a victim won't support. They can have conditions not to be contacting their victims, even if we don't get the support of the victim. So, and they're enforceable. They're arrestable if they're breached. I would suggest that probably the MASH is the place to go to. They're going to deal with the safeguarding parts, and if they're you know, if you want to look at doing some partner work, they're probably your best port of call to start with.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks.
Could I just break in there for one moment, Sergeant Ems, because I see that Ms. Jarley's got her hand up, so it may be that she'll respond on this, and then we'll come back to you, Sergeant Ems.
No problem.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Just to add to that, there's a lot of partnership work that we do in the council with the county and with the voluntary sector. So, for example, at the Meadows, they run the Freedom Programme, which is a programme for survivors of domestic abuse, in 12-week programme. We do partnership events with domestic abuse providers. So we often have a survivors event each year that gets run to raise awareness about the issues of survivors and ensure the voice of survivors is included in the work that we do in the city. And there's two kind of accreditation schemes that we're part of. So one is the White Ribbon campaign, and that's around getting men involved in raising awareness of violence against women and girls. And also we have the Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance accreditation. So the council is accredited there, and we do a lot of work across the council with our partners to look at how we can better support survivors and in terms of their experiences, particularly in getting access to safe homes.
Thank you. So back to you, Sergeant Ems.
Thank you. I'm just trying to figure out where I was on the list. So I think, Councillor Scott, it was next from you. So issues on Jesus Green with a bike gang. That's not something I'm aware of. I know there are groups of people gathering on Jesus Green. As we go into the summer, people will gather. It's a green space. In regards to, I think you spoke about a camera. The police will not be involved in positioning of cameras or bidding for cameras or where they're going to be placed. Certainly, fixed CCTV will be a city council, county council thing. The control room is based in Huntingdon, so it's a county council thing that will be that. But you may want to talk to the ASB team here about this. I'm kind of dropping poor old Tom Eek into it here, but they have access to temporary cameras that can be placed at various locations. But again, it will be a bidding process to put it in the area of highest risk. I mean, to be honest, sounds like a great idea to put a camera where you suggested. That sounds like a really good idea, but it's not something that we would be part of. Although we would be interested to see any footage of any offences captured.
Could I just say, I can't take the credit for that camera because it was actually your Sergeant Mizik who actually suggested the camera there. I was in a meeting with him and he was talking about the need to have a camera there. Right. So that was why I understood that the police would be involved in that aspect. But
yeah, involved in probably recommending that it's a good idea for it to be there, but we wouldn't be involved in actually putting one up. And I'm not surprised it was Kev. He's a very wise man. Okay, so drugs on Hilda Street. Yes, we're aware of that. We've done a whole load of work around that area previously. We know that there was a particular problem address on Victoria Road. That address is no longer a concern to us. The people involved in the issues that were then spilling out into Hilda Street are no longer at that address. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. If it is, then yeah, I'd love to hear about it. And again, that'll be online reporting or calling it in if it's happening.
Good. Thanks very much then, Sergeant Ems. Now, I note that in your report under the heading recommendations, none are advised, but you are seeking views from the committee on those local areas of concern, and the police and partner agencies can work together to action and report on at the next reporting committee meeting. So I expect that in the recitation of issues that have been raised by our individuals, councillors here, you made a list of them, and so perhaps that's sufficient for you to take away and return to the next meeting. Is that appropriate?
If I can, I've got a very long list of lots of different things, so if I can confirm with you guys, if you're all happy with, as I understand it, it's still going to be street-based drug dealing, cycle crime, And that appeared to be the majority of ongoing issues that I can see. Have I missed something?
The issues in East Chesterton about the youth activity there, and also I did raise the issue of people speeding on electrical motor scooters and so forth on footpaths. But
yeah, that would form part of Ops Staple anyway. That would be something that we would look at on a day-to-day basis anyway. But again, you know, unfortunately the very nature of, as soon as that's been reported that somebody's, you know, whizzed past someone else on High Street, then they're gone, and it's probably going to be, you know, a one-off incident that we've missed. If it's consistent on, I don't know, Mere Way, that there is a particular part of Mere Way where they're on the path all the time, then that's probably something we can look at doing. But again, I'm going to need to know where that is, and it's going to need to be narrowed down for me.
The locations, good. Thank you. Thanks so much. So is everybody then satisfied with the issues that have been raised with Sergeant Ems, and that he goes off with our list, but highlighting the couple of issues that he stated? Yeah, I don't see any objection. So thank you so much, Sergeant Ems. We appreciate it very much. Oh, Councillor Gawthorpe Wood has an addition. Yes, Councillor.
I'm sorry to bring this late in the day. I mean, I have got reports about people complaining about speeding along King's Hedges Road. And I noted that Mrs. Rumblatt had managed to get speed cameras. Not speed cameras, but the handheld speed monitors. I wondered if that's something that would be possible. If you could, we could take this offline, but the speeding is deemed an issue.
Right. Thanks, Councillor Gawthorpe Wood. And I see that Councillor Bird has her hand up. So, Councillor Bird, perhaps if you'd come in here, and then we'll come to Sergeant Ems, and then we'll have to move on to the next item, next part of this item. Thanks, Councillor Bird.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I just wanted to make sure that it was the drug dealing as well as the antisocial behaviour with driving. Yeah.
Good. Thanks, Councillor Bird. So, Sergeant Ems, we really appreciate your having come. We appreciate your report. We appreciate your responses to all our questions, and that you're going away with our list and with the highlighted issues to come back and report next time. So thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much. I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave you now, but thank you for giving me the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate it. And now if we come to the community safety team, Tom Eek and Karen Jarley. And Tom Eek, may I just ask you, are we pronouncing your name, a family name, correctly as Eek? I thought of Eck because I was thinking about the German corner, of course, which is ECK, but yours is EKE. So we're pronouncing it correctly.
Yes, it is Eek.
Eek.
Do not ask me where the surname comes from. I have absolutely no idea.
No, it's a really interesting one because it's very unusual. I bet there are not many Eeks around.
No, I don't know. Other than my immediate family, I've not heard the surname anywhere else.
No, thank you. Good. So now it's over to you and Ms. Jarley for your report. Any additional or particular matters that you wanted to report to us?
Thank you very much, Councillor. Just going to pull up the report before I speak to it. So as detailed in our report, the community safety team continues to take proactive action and where there are reports of ASB, antisocial behaviour, or nuisance behaviour. And we work really closely with other organisations in the city, and in this case the North, to do this. So that's housing providers, police neighbourhood teams, and other partnership organisations as needed where we have complex cases. We'll consider preventative, supporting and enforcement actions as appropriate, depending on the nature and risk level of the case. So where we can look at other avenues for enforcement, that's important. During the last reporting period, the community safety team has been involved in dealing with cases that include an injunction being obtained at the county court, causing significant antisocial behaviour and concerns towards local residents. We also have an ongoing case where we're seeking outright possession of the property in Arbury, again due to antisocial behaviour which is affecting the neighbours in the area. We're also in the process of seeking an injunction against the person for forbidding them to continue to take advantage and financially exploit vulnerable individuals across the city. So that relates to the priority point around cuckooing. We're working very closely with the police and partners to ensure that vulnerable individuals are supported when reporting concerns and that safeguarding is put in place where possible. We also work jointly with the police where there are concerns about serious nuisance and antisocial behaviour in the north of the city. And one success of this is that the police secured an extension of a closure order at the same time that we pursued possession action. So really showing how we're working hand in hand with our police colleagues. The team also leads on the Camps Against County Lines project, which is around raising awareness about criminal exploitation and county lines. And we've continued with a number of train the facilitator sessions that have been delivered to agencies in the north of the city so that they are able to deliver the project in their own area. So really empowering communities to continue on with this work. Through the Community Safety Partnership, we have our Save Our Cycles campaign, and that is part of the work of the Cambridge Cycle Crime Prevention Task and Finish Group, which is chaired by us in the City Council and colleagues in Transport. The group, which includes CamCycle, businesses, the 2 universities and the police, launched the Save Our Cycles campaign, which encourages the public to lock and register their bikes. If there are any questions, please let us know.
Jocelyn, I think you're on mute at the moment.
I'm so sorry. I was on mute. I was wanting to not disturb people with extraneous paper flapping. So we do have a question from Councillor Gawthrop Wood. Thanks, Councillor Gawthrop Wood.
I'm getting quite a lot of reports, often I say unfortunately because they're a bit vague, via social media about vandalism, often by youngsters. I wouldn't say that it's as far as criminal damage, so the police haven't been involved, but this is the sort of thing that's quite concerning. So for example, and I haven't verified this, the splash pad and the pulley part, because some children were turning on and off the water, they managed to get into the cabinet. They were playing and managed to pull down a wall in the pulley area as well. And then there's the usual littering of kids coming out from college or school. And I get an awful lot of people complaining to me about this sort of thing. It's keeping on top of it, really. And like I say, I always say to people, report it online when there's been some kind of damage. But what I keep finding is that they use things like social media group CB4 rather than coming direct to the council or me. It does make it harder to handle, I think. And I'd really like comments on that. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Councillor Gawthrop Wood. Ms. Jarley.
I think we'd really encourage people to get in touch with us directly. Antisocial behaviour can be reported online. We have a phone line. When it comes to things like issues of nuisance, it helps us build up a picture. And we also have things when it comes to things like litter, there's a way online to request litter pics in your area. If you just go on the council website, we can actually action that through different parts of the council to get that litter picked up. So I think go and speak to someone at the council, either phone us up or go online and report that antisocial behaviour, and that helps build up the evidence for us so that then we can see what's going on in that area and it adds to the picture.
Right, thank you. So I think that first we thank you, Ms. Jarley and Mr. Eek, for coming this evening and for your report, which is greatly appreciated. And perhaps if we have an adjournment for 10 minutes, because when we come back, we're on item 6, agenda item 6, which is a new road classification for Cambridge, which is being run by the Greater Cambridge Partnership. And we have Mr. Richard Preston with us to report on that item. And there are a number of questions already that we've received in relation to it. And we have a number of questions for our open forum. So if we have a short adjournment of 10 minutes and we come back, it's now 7:47. So if we come back at we've come back at 8 o'clock, and then we'll proceed with item 6 on the agenda. So thank you.
We should now be live again, Chair.
Great, good, thanks. So we're back. This is North Area Committee, and we're proceeding with our agenda. And we're now on agenda item 6, which is a new road classification for Cambridge, which is being attended to by the Greater Cambridge Partnership. And we fortunately have Richard Preston with us, who is an officer with the Greater Cambridge Partnership. So it's over to you, Richard, now to give us the report on a new road classification for Cambridge. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to come along and discuss this with the Area Committee. I'm joined tonight by my colleague Jane Grant, who's a member of the GCP's communications team, and she's taking a note of the key issues that come out of the meeting tonight. So, with your permission, I'll share my screen so I can go through a presentation. Right. Hopefully people can see that screen. Is that okay?
Absolutely,
okay.
We can see it.
Thank you. Okay. Well, as you've said, the Greater Cambridge Partnership has been tasked by the County Council to review the road classification in Cambridge. First question, I suppose, is, well, why are we reviewing it now? Well, the road network in Cambridge was last reviewed in the early 80s following the opening of the northern and western bypasses, that's the A14 and the M11, and significant changes have been made to the road network in that time. And some of our priorities about how we operate the network have changed. So it was felt appropriate this time to review the classification to see how it can be adapted to respond to some of the key policies, both national and local, that we need to take account of. And some of these are set out in the slide before you. They're very much focusing on quality of life issues. People are well familiar with the concerns about air quality in the city. We have to consider the implications of climate change and the government's decarbonising transport plan, as well as a particular focus on active travel, taking into account gear change, the national walking and cycling policy. And following the pandemic, the government has also launched its Bus Back Better initiative, and we need to make sure we're responding to that as part of the review. We need to make sure what comes out of the review is consistent with the Combined Authorities Local Transport and Connectivity Plan, as well as being consistent with the local plan. But what are the key aims of the review? Well, as I've said, they're very much focused on quality of life, meeting those challenges around climate change, air quality, and encouraging improved health and well-being by active travel as much as possible, and by promoting public transport, again, as an alternative to car-based travel. Perhaps one aspect that hasn't been given as much consideration in the past as it should have done is the sense of place within the highway network. Whilst the network is primarily a movement tool, it also can create opportunities for social and community interaction and for members of the public to dwell and enjoy the highway space as part of the public realm. So the starting point is our current classification, and the map in front of you shows you the main road classification as it exists at the present time. In the early 80s, when it was last reviewed, we created the first ring road in the city. It's currently numbered the A1134, which was intended as the main circulatory tool for the city. But I suppose perhaps rather surprisingly, at the same time, the decision was taken to retain main roads through the heart of the city. So the A603 through East Road, Gonville Place, Lensfield Road was retained as an A road, and Hills Road was retained as an A road as well. Now, in terms of the ambition for the review, we want to encourage trips by cars, vans and lorries to use the main roads in the city as much of their journey as possible, to thereby reduce traffic levels on the more local roads and streets across the city. Many of those routes are used as through routes. They're very popular rat runs, particularly at peak periods. And the intention would be that if the plan is endorsed and we move forward with implementing the plan, that we would introduce a series of point road closures, which are commonly now known as modal filters, and they will be put in place on local roads and streets to stop these through movements by private motor vehicles. But I would emphasise it's important to be clear that whilst we would remove through traffic, we would still provide access to local residents and businesses to make sure they can go about their business on the road network. So obviously this would mean that we would be directing traffic to use as much of the main road network as possible and to leave the main road network by the closest available junction to the destination that drivers are seeking. Well, the potential outcomes from that, well, it's likely that for many private motor vehicle trips, they would be less direct and potentially longer. But of course, that would mean many of our local streets would carry far less traffic. We'd have reduced noise, less pollution, less congestion. But there is the potential that traffic levels could shift from local roads to main roads, and there could be an increase in some areas. And we need to make sure we understand fully what the implications are of that change so that we could consider what might be appropriate to try and mitigate any increases on the main road network. And the intention is that we would undertake traffic modelling to assess those changes to make sure we can consider what could be done to alleviate any increases. Cyclists and scheduled buses would be allowed through closure points, those modal filters that I talked about, to make those trips as reliable, pleasant and convenient as possible. So we've devised a new series categories of road in the city, and we've applied them to the current map of the city. I'm going to jump forward one slide here just to go through what those 5 categories of streets are. The first 2 categories are distributor roads. These are the titles we've given them at the present time. I would stress that these are not set in stone, and we'd welcome comments on how appropriate people think these terms are. So we'd have 2 levels of distributor roads, primary and secondary. The primary roads would be the main movement backbone of the city, and they would be supported by the secondary roads that would carry perhaps slightly lower levels of traffic, but they would fill in the gaps where we don't have some of the significant major roads. And that's particularly true on the east of the city, where we don't have a main arterial route coming into the heart of the city. Now, working down the list, we would then move on to 2 categories of access streets. The first is an area access street. As the name suggests, that would provide access to large areas of the city. They would be underpinned by local access streets that would feed off those area access streets to provide access to more localised areas. The 5th category of street is what we currently call civic streets. These would be mainly the small streets in the city centre where we have most of our retail, leisure, educational activity being undertaken. So we've taken those 5 categories and we've applied them to the map, the road network, as you see before you. And this is our initial idea of what the network could look like. As I say, it's not set in stone. The consultation is about giving people the opportunity to influence the final form of this map. But as you can see there, the red routes, which are the primary distributor roads, look pretty similar to the current structure. But it's interesting to note that we're not proposing any distributor roads passing through or across the ring road system. The secondary distributor roads, as I've said, are filling in gaps on the eastern side of the city. The area access streets, which are shown in the pale purple colour, provide access to those larger areas, and then you see the local access streets in the green colour that then feed into more localised areas. And then you see a cluster of yellow streets in the city centre. Those are the civic streets where we think we need to provide a much higher level of pedestrianisation and priority for cycling in particular. So from that, some of the key issues that we've identified today, and there may be other key issues that arise through the consultation. I've mentioned about traffic displacement and the concerns that we may simply divert traffic from local streets onto main roads, and we're aware of the potential risk around that, and we intend to make sure we have good data and we model this accurately to make sure we can understand what needs to be done to address any of those concerns. In terms of the city centre, we have a particular issue at the moment in terms of bus routing. The Making Connections proposals that are being developed by the Greater Cambridge Partnership, envisaging the potential for a doubling of the bus fleet in Cambridge as part of providing an enhanced bus network across the Greater Cambridge area. And at the present time, most of the interchange in the city centre for buses is focused around the Drummer Street area, where we have no additional capacity available. Prior to the pandemic, the area was already working over capacity, and therefore we don't think it's reliable to just simply push more and more buses through that central area. Many of the streets that are used by buses in the heart of the city, that concerns have been raised about the suitability of using them for large vehicles like buses. So we're asking some questions about how we should address that issue, and we're suggesting one possible approach is to remove that interchange and move it further out and route the buses slightly further away from a main busy central area of streets. That would be part of an agenda that's looking at a greater pedestrian and cycling priority across the main city centre area. Some of our streets are already pedestrianised to a certain degree. We're looking to expand that over a much wider area. And I mentioned the yellow routes on the map. So we're very interested in the extent of those yellow streets. Are our initial ideas appropriate? Do they go too far, or do they not go far enough? Access for taxis is an important issue that we want to get some feedback on. At the present time, taxis enjoy many exemptions from access restrictions across the city. They're allowed into bus lanes, they're allowed through bus gates. They have access to many of the streets where we have restricted access in the city centre. So we're asking whether that's the way we should continue to allow taxis to operate, or should we take a different approach? We're also asking for feedback on whether we should treat hackney carriages that work from ranks in the city in the same way to private hire cars which are pre-booked. Currently they are given the same degree of exemption within traffic restrictions, and we're asking, is that still appropriate? If we have a much wider pedestrianised area in the centre of the city, of course, that will raise some questions about deliveries to the city. It's important that we allow businesses and retailers to continue their activities. So we've been looking at how we can address that issue, and we're very keen to see how we can encourage a greater consolidation of deliveries into the city, and perhaps encouraging more businesses to consolidate their deliveries, combined with the use of low emission vehicles, might be a way forward to try and incentivise fewer vehicles and provide greater degree of flexibility for businesses in the city centre. We need to be aware of road safety, and the review needs to make sure it's consistent with County Council road safety policies. Of course, if we're talking about closing off some routes to through traffic or further access restrictions in the heart of the city, there are bound to be exceptional cases that need to be considered, and we're pretty sure there will be certain requests for vehicle and user exemptions, and we're posing some questions within the consultation to seek feedback and guide the final decisions that are taken on some of those issues. So we're looking for feedback on the map that I've already shown you and on those categories of streets that I've described. We're also looking for feedback on this chart that's available on our consultation webpage that gives some idea of the degree of network accessibility we would provide for individual modes. With walking and cycling, clearly we're very keen to encourage active travel, so we're looking to give those modes of transport as much freedom on the road network as we possibly can. With local buses, we need to make sure that they have extensive network access along the routes where they're scheduled to operate. With cars and commercial vehicles, clearly under these proposals, they would have less access to the whole network, and it would mean that we'd be focusing a lot of their movements on the distributor roads. In terms of emergency service vehicles, clearly we would want to give them as much access as we can across the whole network. The last category we've included in the chart looks at vehicles being used by blue badge holders, and that's an emotive issue, and it causes some problems in that blue badges are issued to people, they're not issued to vehicles. And that can make enforcement of any arrangements on the network quite difficult. So we're asking for some feedback on that to guide what final decisions councillors take with regard to how we allow vehicles used by blue badge holders to use the road network. The consultations started on the 25th of May. It runs through to the 18th of July. We've got a series of public meetings that we've advertised if people want to come along and engage with us. And we are visiting all the area committees to seek their feedback as well. So, any questions?
Right. Yes, well, we do have two questions from the public. So perhaps if we have those first, and then we'll come to, I can see a long list of councillors too. But I know that Anna Williams is here with her question, and also Susan Grossi. So if we have Anna Williams first, and then we have Susan Grossi, and then we'll come back to Richard Preston, and then we'll continue down the line of the councillors who have their questions too. So thank you, Anna.
Thanks, everyone, and hello. And I think you mentioned earlier, I am an employee of CamCycle, but I'm primarily speaking from a personal point of view as well, as a resident of North Cambridge, with my question. Okay, so my question is, I'd like to know, I know this consultation is fairly new and different people will have different levels of knowledge, but I'd like to know what local members' plans are for encouraging engagement with the consultation among local residents, businesses and other stakeholders, and for leading positive discussions on the changes the proposal could mean for our area and how local people can help shape the details. I'm concerned that there's not always a joined up process or sort of attitude to transport in our area, and it's important to make sure that this is approached from a user hierarchy point of view. So we're looking first at the key routes for pedestrians, and then cyclists, then buses, and then motor vehicles. Because at the moment the classification, the maps are very much based around the motor vehicle routes, and we actually need to know as well where are going to be the key cycling routes, where are the key routes for walkers, where they need better facilities as well, and buses as well. I know, the other thing is, although I strongly welcome the changes, I think they will create safer active travel routes and nicer places for people to live and work. I'm also a little bit concerned about the proposal and the location of the modal filter on Green End Road, and how this will affect the journeys of people, of those who need to drive from Fen Road, from the other side of the crossing, because obviously at the moment they've already got quite a long detour. And so I think Councillor Bird mentioned earlier about sort of following up with Network Rail on possible different connections from there, because I think, we really will need that better connection out to Milton Road. Otherwise, we're going to have lots of traffic going quite a long way round East Chesterton just to get out to some of the key routes. So yeah, any thoughts on that would be great.
Great, thanks Anna Williams. And now we'll come to Susan Grossi, and then we do have another question from the public, and then we'll come back to Richard Preston to respond to the three questions. So Susan Grossi, please.
Hello there, thank you. I hope you can see and hear me.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. My question is quite parochial in that I live on Albert Street, which is a little road between Chesterton Road and Victoria Road. So obviously I'm very interested in that area of the map. And I note that both Chesterton Road and Victoria Road, which is currently a 20-mile-an-hour zone, are being kept up at the highest level of, I'm afraid I've forgotten the terms that you used. And it's the highest level of distributor roads. And it seems to me that that's not needed, because if it's meant to be like the spokes of a bike and basically all the main roads come into the middle, all that Victoria Road and Chesterton Road do is to join up other main roads like Milton Road to Huntingdon Road and so on. If we're encouraging people to come in closest to where they want to be rather than shifting around between the different parts of town, then I really can't see. And to have Victoria Road being both a main distributor road and a 20-mile-an-hour zone, which is needed because it's so heavily populated, it seems to me to be a disconnect. So I plead, please, to relook at our part of town, because we seem to be surrounded by red roads and we're heavily urbanized and very densely populated. It's all little terraced houses. So it's please look again at that area of town if you would. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Susan Grossi. And now the question that's coming on the chat. This regards Histon Roads becoming an A road. The question is, does becoming an A road mean that residents will have lorries, etc., 24 hours a day coming up and down the road, as the TIR lorries make a lot of noise and are also extremely polluting? So now back to you, Richard Preston, for those 3 questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of consultation that I think Anna was raising, when the GCP Executive Board approved the consultation, they were most insistent that we cast the net as widely as we can, because we need to understand that these proposals can impact on very, very many people that access the city for their various needs. So we are trying to engage with as many stakeholder groups as we can, and we try to make ourselves as available as we can as part of that process. So, you know, we are trying to get as wide a range of views as we possibly can from all stakeholder groups. And if there are particular groups that want to speak to us, just contact us and we'll set up one-to-one meetings with groups if they feel that would be helpful to them before they submit their consultation comments. I think it's worth emphasising that what this first stage is about. This is focusing on how we want to define the network going forward. There are lots of questions people have around about detail about, well, where are you going to put the modal filter here and there? There will be a second phase to the project. Once we've determined what we want the network to look like going forward, then we will have to develop a plan that will take us from the current classification of the network to the new classification. And that may take some considerable time. And there will be a further consultation on that to inform the priorities. And then when we get into the detail of schemes, there will be the usual public consultation around the detail, because we've deliberately not tried to indicate where all these modal filters might go. That's for a later stage. At this stage, we're looking at the principles behind the review. So this is the start of a long conversation. This isn't the first opportunity and the last opportunity people will have. There will be a series of consultations as we develop these ideas further. So hopefully that gives people the reassurance that they're not suddenly going to have decisions made on individual streets without having the opportunity to feedback at that very local level, because I think it's very important that local communities are involved in those decisions. There was some discussions about making sure that, I think Anna Williams said that she thought the routes would help, that the proposals would help with cycling and walking routes. But clearly we need to make sure that they are consistent with other strategies and plans. And we're building up a series of layers here to make sure that they are aligned and there aren't inconsistencies. Wouldn't it be perfect if everything matched when you put the layers all together? And there are bound to be some areas where we haven't quite got it right, but we're going through that exercise to make sure that we are building in all these various layers. And as Anna said, making sure that we're consistent with the cycle routes across the city. Given the focus on active travel, it's important that we do that mapping exercise and make sure we do get it aligned. in terms of Albert Street and the sort of Victoria Road, Chesterton Road, Chesterton Lane area, that has always been a very sensitive point for many, many years. I can remember before the northern and western bypasses were open, that Chesterton Road, Victoria Road was very heavily congested, and it was always an area of concern, given the proximity of residential development to the street. But in all honesty, the route has always been a busy route. It's always been classified as a high level route. The problem is, if you start tinkering with the ring road, and Victoria Road and Chesterton Road form part of the ring road system, you then start to break the ring road, and the whole purpose of a ring road is to allow traffic to circulate. And of course, if you took Victoria Road out of the equation, then you would just simply put all that traffic, well, a vast majority of that traffic, on the Chesterton Road. And equally, if you were to take Chesterton Road out of the ring road equation, the same would happen to Victoria Road. But I think it's important to emphasise here that whilst we're suggesting we would there is the potential for a lot of interventions on some of our local streets, that doesn't mean to say that more shouldn't be done on some of our busier streets, where to mitigate any changes in traffic patterns. So it's not just about focusing on the local streets, it's making sure that the main road network is fit for purpose as well. In terms of Histon Road becoming an A road, it's currently a B road. It may well stay as a B road, but what we're emphasising here is that it will continue to act as a main distributor road. It will carry a lot of traffic into the heart of the city. And equally, if you take Histon Road out of the equation, you just put more pressure on the routes like Huntingdon Road and Milton Road. So it's part of sharing out the inevitable burden that we have on the road network. I think we've picked up lots of concerns about heavy goods vehicle movements in the city, not only on Histon Road, but other routes where people are raising concerns. Clearly, the County Council has a policy that considers where HGV should be restricted. And we would need to make sure that in taking the review forward, that we were consistent with the County Council's policy on that. It's always very easy to ban vehicles on certain routes, but it inevitably means they go on some other route. And if you start to restrict heavy goods vehicles on Histon Road, you're simply going to transfer the burden onto other routes, and where I'm sure that residents would have equal concerns about the impact those vehicles have on the road environment.
Good. Thanks so much, Richard. Now, I know that Anna's got a follow-up question, but perhaps if we continue down the line, because I think that all the questions will probably intersect in some way, and so then we'll come to Anna just in seriatim. Good. So we've got Councillor Hilary Cox-Condren, then Councillor Jenny Gawthorpe-Wood, and then Councillor Mike Todd-Jones. So if we have those three, and then Richard can come back to respond to those three, and then we'll continue with the remaining number. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hilary.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Richard. So this is mainly a question to you, and it's also sort of elaborating on what Anna was asking too. So I'm asking it sort of in my role as County Councillor for Arbury, but also as Vice Chair of Community, Social Mobility and Inclusion at County, and also as somebody who really struggles with filling in anything online and zones out very often at consultations, which I probably shouldn't say, but do a lot of work around engagement, and I do a lot of work around as an artist. I've done a lot of creative consultations and been involved in a lot, and I'm actually talking to one of your officers around how we could possibly develop this as maybe pop-ups in public spaces for people to come and engage. But part of my question really is about how can people only respond to this online, or can we gather feedback in other ways that we can give to you about this? So, for instance, if I wanted to hold a workshop in a school in quite a creative way and had different feedback, could I then feedback that to you in a different way? Or if we had a pop-up, can we create maps ourselves and feedback that to you? Or does it all have to be individuals online, please? Oh, because, sorry, I'm just going to add to this because, and you touched on it, it's about bringing it to life, isn't it? You know, and you really started to touch on that in talking about the places and the spaces and how people move and, you know, maybe deliveries. And of course, that's what we can do in our role as councillors in our communities. We can really bring it to life and start to recognise, you know, talk about what it can actually mean, the differences that it can mean. And also, of course, reaching, I don't know, like, well, my son goes to Long Road Sixth Form College, for instance, young people like that who are using our spaces and roads all the time and negotiating them, but probably not going online to do a consultation. So that was quite long, but thank you.
Thank you. And now it's to Councillor Gawthorpe Wood.
Okay, well, I've got 5 questions, so I'll try and be quick about it. The first one actually fits with what Hilary's been saying, Councillor Cox-Condron. How much feedback have you had so far, and kind of in what form is it? Because I'm quite concerned that King's Hedges a lot of my residents don't do Zoom, and whether they get themselves down to Fenners or Kelsey Kerridge is a bit of a moot point. So it's for me, seeing a map with the colours is key. Second one, yeah, if we have restricted areas, enforcing. I mean, when I first came here, you know, there would be police stopping you from riding the wrong way on a bicycle up a one-way street. That doesn't seem to happen now. So I'm thinking the pedestrian areas in the city centre. I'm very intrigued about I don't know whether this is too early, but potential locations for the bus station. And then this is the other thing, goods vehicles. And what ideas are there that you would have about, you know, one might organising the delivery to shops in the city centre or getting smaller vehicles? You've mentioned this. I'm very intrigued about that, how that would work, deliveries to shops, and not just in the city centre, but also other parts of the suburbs. And then how does this fit with the development or with the Milton Road project? Thank you. I think I know the lot.
Right, thanks so much. Councillor Todd Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, hi, Richard. Can I just ask you something about the what you define? You know, you called about the principles that are going to define the network in the future, and really, it's essentially about the distributor roads and the area access streets, and whether the broad intention here is to try wherever possible, certainly in terms of private motor vehicle, prevent movement from one kind of segment that a distributor road is feeding into to across to another. Therefore, the intention is to go in and out of that area the distributor road is feeding into, out to the ring road or perhaps the northern bypass, and then come back along another distributor road if you wanted to get to, say, the eastern part of the city from the west or vice versa. So I'm just trying to get to grips really with the principles that you mentioned as kind of defining this network in the future. And therefore, if private motor traffic is going to be prevented from effectively moving from one segment to the other across the city, but have to go in and back out again, which might be an admirable intention, but I think it needs to be very clear to everyone that that is what is kind of being proposed. And then the arguments about modal filters that might be in place to prevent that sort of cross-city traffic also becomes a bit of a moot point because the principle's been agreed, and so the detail of which streets may have modal filters might become somewhat irrelevant given the principles that are already in place. But I think it'd be very helpful to make it really clear what the vision, what the aim of the whole strategy is in terms of the network in the future. Thanks.
Thanks, Richard. Preston. And thanks, Mike Todd-Jones.
Yeah. Okay, I'll try and pick up all those comments. Clearly, in terms of consultation, we do encourage people to look at our information online, and we encourage them to fill in our questionnaires. But we have to recognise that doesn't suit everybody. And if people want to provide feedback in a different form, absolutely fine. Send it to us, or if you want to talk to us about how you can feed that information in, absolutely no problem at all. So we're very open to receive information and views in whatever form people find the most convenient for their personal needs. I think there was some talk about enforcement, pedestrian areas. I think one of the things we recognise as part of the review is it's very easy to talk about restricting traffic and controlling routes. Well, of course, that's fine if it actually works. And for example, we are picking up a fair amount of concern around heavy commercial vehicle traffic, and the fact that whilst we have restrictions, a lot of people feel they're not enforced well enough. Well, I think here, if we're talking about further restrictions on the network, we need to make sure that we actually deliver on that, and it's not just another talking exercise where we make another traffic order and we put up another sign and we expect everything to fall in place. So I think as we develop our plans for delivering this new network, we've got to focus on making sure that we are providing appropriate forms of enforcement to make sure we're delivering the outcomes that we're seeking from this review. Because I think there are some weaknesses in the system at the present time. We are expecting to have more enforcement powers to use cameras more effectively across the road network. Government are in the process of developing some new regulations, and hopefully they'll come through, and that will allow us to be a lot more flexible in the way that we enforce certain restrictions. I think it was mentioned about the bus station and where might the bus station move to. I don't think it's really a question of taking the bus station in the centre of Cambridge and plonking it somewhere else. I think we're really talking about trying to dissipate that demand over a much greater area. I think it's impossible to find a location where you could say, right, we're going to build a new bus station here. Attempts have been made in the past. Areas like Christ Pieces have been suggested in the past, and they've never been well received. So we are looking at what the options are if we decide to displace bus journeys slightly further out. That will involve a lot of detailed work, and again, a lot of consultation with affected parties. So we are starting to look at that. In terms of goods consolidation, we have carried out some early work talking to stakeholders in the city centre to see if it's going to be worth the GCP running a pilot scheme for consolidation. Because I think we're very keen to minimise the number of goods vehicle trips we have in the city centre, and we can do that if we can consolidate more deliveries. Unfortunately, that engagement has proved quite difficult during the pandemic. We've had good engagement with lots of the colleges, but in terms of the retail sector, that's proved quite challenging, perhaps understandably, because a lot of the shops, I think, have been focused on perhaps more important things during the pandemic. So I think we need to revisit that in terms of talking to retailers about understanding what potential there is for consolidation, because clearly I think if we can reduce the number of goods vehicles in the city, I think that would be well received. But when you look at the track record of consolidation schemes across the UK, there have been several attempts at this, but the outcomes have been pretty poor. So it is a pretty difficult, it's a tough nut to crack, but we are continuing to talk to people about that. And certainly, I think there is a willingness now, given the cost of transport, to see how savings can be made if we can act as a catalyst to get a lot of those deliveries consolidated. There was mentioned about how does Milton Road fit into this? Well, clearly, with our initial ideas, Milton Road remains a key distributor road for the city. Clearly, it's going to get a lot of investment, and it's going to hopefully look a lot better than it does at the present time, and hopefully it will perform a lot better. I think that comes back to my earlier point. Whilst the proposals are focusing very much on lots of our local streets, that doesn't mean to say, as part of the review, there shouldn't be investment in the major roads as well, just as Milton Road is receiving quite significant investment. Moving on to sort of the principles and Councillor Todd Jones' comments about making sure we understand the principles. We found this quite difficult with the wording and the descriptions to try and get across the key principle about that we are closing off routes to through traffic. So, you know, as an example, we don't really want traffic travelling from Histon Road through residential areas to get to Milton Road and vice versa. But we do want to make sure that residents have as much freedom as we possibly can to allow them to go about their trips as much as normal. But clearly, I think we also need to recognise, when you look at the road network in the city, you know, there was this ongoing debate about, well, who's to blame for the congestion? Is it all the people travelling from outside of the city into the city, or is it residents? Well, the large survey that GCP undertook back in 2017 clearly showed that both parties are contributing towards that congestion in the city. Half of the trips on the network in the city start and finish in the city. So city residents are contributing to the congestion, just as residents from outside of the city are contributing it. So the idea here is that both groups should contribute towards the solution, but by, you know, having their car journeys discouraged by the sort of methods that we're suggesting here. As I've said, we have found it quite difficult to describe the key principles about filtering of roads so that we could stop these traffic movements in our local residential areas, primarily to focus people on main routes. And I think Mike's description was a pretty good, I think it described the principles pretty well, actually. I think he's done it as well as anybody. So I think he's captured that key point about the way we want the network to operate in future.
Thank you very much, Richard Preston. And now we come to 3 more questions, and there is 2 more after that. So it's Councillor Catherine Ray, then Councillor Richard Swift, and Councillor Jerry Bird, and then we'll come back to Richard Preston, and then we'll come to our next questions. So over to you, Councillor Ray.
Hi, Richard. I appreciate the logic of looking at this in 2 phases, having a phase 1 in principle and then a phase 2 detailed plans. But I think a lot of people, that their feelings are very strongly swayed by whether or not they will get a modal filter and whether they want it or not. So I think, in a sense, the devil is in the detail, and people's attitude to the scheme as a whole are very much coloured by the local detail of what they want in their particular area. My main that's one thing. The main question I wanted to ask, you've touched on already, which is whether you intend to use more smart technology, particularly in local residential areas. Now, clearly, you use it to exclude buses and taxis, to exclude cars other than buses and taxis from the city centre. Whether there's any intention to extend this to local areas so that, for instance, you could keep a modal filter open, allowing permeability, so reducing the overall length of necessary journeys, but at the same time restricting it to through traffic and rat runners. Are there any plans to use a number plate recognition and that sort of thing to do that?
Thank you, Councillor Ray. Now, Councillor Richard Swift and then Councillor Jerry Bird. Councillor Swift, you'll have to come off. You're on mute. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. And thanks, Richard. I just wondered how, if you've had a look at, I'm sure you have, at other cities around the world. For example, a resident wrote to me about to just come back from Dijon and was very impressed by the use of minibuses instead of big buses in the city centre, for example. And then Ghent, I think Councillor Todd Jones had interested in that, where you actually have what he was alluding to earlier, that you can divide the city into quarters and you go out of the city to come into the next quarter rather than going through the centre. Ideas like that. That's the first point. The second one, you said you were talking about other strategies and plans, and in 2 years' time, touch wood, the Milton Road redevelopment will be finished. And I'm interested as a local councillor in West Chesterton to try and improve or revisit Mitcham's Corner. There was a consultation and plan done in 2018 by the City Council, which actually wanted to get rid of the 1970s style race course going all the way, racing track going all the way round in a figure of 8, which I noticed still on the strategic plan initiative, whatever it's called. The idea being to actually have Milton Road going down to Chesterton Road rather than going round in a sort of figure of 8 configuration, and then opening up Chesterton Road to being two-way in its entire length rather than going round the racetrack. So I'd just be interested to know whether the Milton Road redevelopment could be part of the new road classification research. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Councillor Swift. Now, Councillor Bird. Thanks.
Chair.
Yeah, good.
Thanks, Richard, for your report. Okay, I have a few questions. First of all, the first one is buses. They're a headache at the moment. You use a bus, you go and wait at the bus stop, and instead of being 10 minutes now, they're 20 minutes, and then they'll suddenly not appear. So you could be at the bus stop for 50 minutes before a bus comes. Before we do anything, we need a decent bus service so we know we can get into town rather than use our cars, because that's what's happening. A lot of people are getting fed up waiting for a bus, so they jump in their cars. So that's the first issue. The second issue is on the consultation. There are many people that can't read or write. So is there a phone number or something they can contact officers on so they can give their feedback in that respect, which would perhaps make it easier for them if they've got no family members or something. Okay, so the next one was about the taxis. We've had this discussion before, as you know, about taxis being able to get through modular filters. I think this is an important issue because a lot of elderly people use taxis. And if we're going to be making detours around so they can go to their shops, it's going to cost them more money, which they can't afford. So we'd either have to work a system where it's going to be cheaper taxi fares for everybody, or for the elderly, like they've got a bus pass. So something would work that way for them. The next one is the blue badge. Yes, I agree what you said about the it's for the person and not the car. People can have their car changed to a different taxation if they're disabled, to disabled. So they wouldn't, you would then be able to get the registration and recognise that number as being a disabled vehicle, not just the blue badge. But there must be some way we can work a system this day and age for a blue badge to be noticed. Some system where they, as they go through, they swipe it like you do in a car park or something. So be nice to know there's something we can do there. And I'm like Anna, I'm concerned about if we're going to have a modular filter on Green End Road. We've got residents that live right down the bottom of Fen Road, which is in South Cambs, which have to come out that way. We have businesses that have to come out that way and come along Green End Road to get out of the city. And the same as on Nuffield Road. We've got a business park there as well. So this is going to cause a lot of problems unless, of course, the GCP will make a new road to go out the other side of the crossing on Fen Road onto Milton, onto the A14, and the same with the Nuffield Road industrial site. Make a different roadway out for them, either on Milton Road or I'm not sure whatever way you could do it, actually, Richard. But they're just some thoughts of mine. Okay. Thanks.
Sorry, Councillor Jerry Bed, Cowley Road would be the other option, wouldn't it?
Yes, true. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you, Councillor McQueen, too, for your intervention. So back to Richard Preston.
First issue about smart technology. Yeah, I mentioned about new government regulations, and hopefully government will follow through with that, because if we do get the powers to use cameras for enforcement of moving vehicle offences, it allows us to be far more flexible and smart about the way we would operate any modal filter. So yes, if those powers come through, it opens up a lot of opportunities where we can be a lot more flexible. Of course, we haven't got into the detail at this stage about how modal filters would operate. It's very much at this stage about the principles, about defining how we want the network to operate. Once we get into the detail of it during the second stage of the project, yes, we'll be able to focus on those issues. But certainly, I think there is every opportunity to be a lot smarter about the way that we filter the network. There were mention about minibuses. Yes, we recognise that if we are displacing bus services further out from the city centre, for a lot of people that will mean they have a bit further to walk, and that may well be good for their health and well-being, but clearly there are other people that would find that more of a challenge, and we need to make sure that in moving in that direction we don't make the city centre inaccessible to certain members of the community. So we've mentioned that we would need to put effort and investment into measures to make the city centre accessible for all. And we've said, things like shop mobility could be enhanced. We've also suggested the idea of bringing back a shuttle service. We used to have a city centre shuttle service many years ago that operates in the central area to allow people to move around all the destinations they want to visit within the city centre. And we've suggested, well, perhaps a way forward would be to have a zero emission shuttle service operating within that area to sort of fill in the gaps that could be created if conventional bus services are routed a little bit further out. The review is being guided by examples from abroad. Ghent is one that's often mentioned, and in many ways I think what we're putting forward is our take on the Ghent principles being adapted to the Cambridge setting. I don't think you can simply just copy what's done in other cities because our geography of our network is different. But I think we are building on that, and we're also looking at other cities. Birmingham is developing a similar approach to the way that they're operating the network. I think they refer to traffic cells, where you come in and out of one area only by one key access point. In terms of Mitcham's Corner, yes, the City Council's planning department developed a very interesting proposal for that area. The GCP did look into this several years ago and carried out some early traffic modelling to see what it would look like if you were to modify the road network in that way. Unfortunately, the predicted outcomes were not that encouraging, because they were suggesting that you'd have very significant increases in delays, particularly along Milton Road. I think, if I can recall the outcomes, it was suggesting that the queues from Mitchams would stretch back beyond Elizabeth Way. So I think we recognise the aspiration there, but I think at the present time, certainly based on pre-COVID traffic levels, that's a pretty difficult scheme to deliver at the present time. However, when you look at the wider GCP programme, this scheme, the Making Connections proposals with vastly enhanced bus services and the potential for some form of charging, that would certainly reduce traffic levels, and it may make schemes like Mitchams much more viable than they would be based on pre-COVID levels. So, you know, that will be an interesting debate as we go forward. Councillor Bird's mention of bus services, yes, the GCP is setting out has high aspirations to significantly enhance bus services across the Greater Cambridge area, and you know, those proposals will be debated by the board later on this year, and I think they are key to further restraint of general traffic in the city. As people have been saying, you just can't restrict traffic without giving the travelling public the options, the alternatives to just relying on car-based traffic. There was a mention about consultation and about phone numbers. I think we do provide contact details. I don't know if my colleague Jane Grant could comment on that at this point in terms of contact telephone numbers.
Yes, we do indeed have a contact telephone number. I'll read it out now if anyone would like to use it. It's 01223 699 906. And you can use that to ring up to give your feedback. Also, if you want to fill in the survey, you can do so over the telephone if you don't want to do it online. And you can also ring up to request a paper copy of the brochure and the survey. So it's quite a flexible telephone number to use, and it is printed on all our material promoting the consultation. So that's Cambridge 699 906. Do please tell everybody about that number. We'd be very pleased to take calls.
Thank you, Jane. I think Councillor Bird was also touching on the fact that consultations do prove difficult for certain people to respond to, and I think we're well aware that it's always important to make sure we have good engagement with disability groups in particular, and we try our hardest on that. With this particular scheme, we've asked Transport for All, a leading London-based charity that are at the forefront of disability issues. We've asked them to carry out an audit of our initial proposals and to carry out a critique. They're also have good engagement with lots of disability groups, so they are a good gateway to make sure that we are engaging with as wide a part of the the community as we possibly can. I think Councillor Bird also raised some interesting points around taxes. I think we welcome feedback on this. It's a difficult issue. Clearly, for some people, taxis are just a convenient form of car-based travel, and people like to use them. And you could argue, well, they contribute towards congestion like any other car trip. But equally, there are members of society that rely heavily on taxis as their only form of public transport. So it's not a black and white issue, and there are certainly shades of grey here, and that's why we're particularly keen on hearing people's views on that. I think she also mentioned about Green End Road and some of the issues there. Absolutely understand that, but I suppose I'd refer to my earlier comments. We're not at that detailed stage. We don't have any fixed ideas, but clearly if we get to that stage, there would be additional consultation and engagement with local communities to inform any final decisions on where modal filters should be located. And clearly, I think it's important to emphasise that in terms of developing and delivering a network like this, with some modal filters, I think it's fairly clear from some communities they're very desperate to have modal filters. I think in other areas, it's a bit of a 50-50 here. People are not sure. There are some people who are very for it, some people are very against it, and perhaps we have to make sure that we're moving forward with those sorts of measures when the time is right. And clearly, I think what will help in a lot of these discussions will be having good data. And we do intend to collect a lot more data across the network because I think in many of our streets and roads in Cambridge, we know the volume of traffic, but we don't know enough about the purpose of the trips that are being undertaken. What's the proportion of through traffic on some of these streets? And I think once we capture that evidence, that will allow local communities to engage with the issue of modal filters on a better basis than they do at the present time. I think there was also a suggestion came up that could Gilbert Road have a modal filter? Well, our initial proposals do indicate that Gilbert Road could become an access street. And if that's the case, there is the potential to have a modal filter on Gilbert Road. But as I say, it's important at this stage just to get the principles right.
Thank you. Yes, and as a West Chesterton councillor, where Gilbert Road passes through, we'd have to, of course, be seeking views of our residents on that question. But we've got 2 more questions on this, and then we need to go to the public question section, as we do have several questions there. But I'm just going to be really quick and self-indulgent on this issue of whether we should be looking at what's happening elsewhere, as in Ghent or Dijon. And perhaps I might suggest that we look to Cambridge, Massachusetts and Canberra, the capital of Australia, because the person who designed Canberra, Burley Griffin, 2 of them, the husband and wife team, came from Cambridge, Massachusetts. Now, Cambridge, Massachusetts is actually based on its design on Cambridge here in England. And I've always thought that if one wants to go in that direction in Cambridge, England, one goes in the opposite direction and then ends up there. And that's the same in Cambridge, Massachusetts and in Canberra. In Canberra, it's about roads. If you want to end up over here, you drive in that way and you end up there. It's a very strange configuration, but it's exactly the same as Cambridge here. And so therefore, it may be wise to go to those 2 locations to see whether they have looked at the issue of this problem of city access and pollution and traffic and so on. I'm not asking you to comment on that, but it'd be lovely to have a trip in either direction. But now we come to Anna Williams and Councillor Martin Smart. So over to you, Anna, and then to Councillor Martin Smart, and then back to Richard Preston. Thank you.
Thanks for letting me have a follow-up. That's much appreciated. I think Richard's touched on some of the things I was going to say. Just so he said it is going to be sort of tied in with the other strategy. So presumably that will include the local cycling and walking infrastructure plans, which already had a look at the sort of walking and cycling networks that we need. Just from engagement that I've done already, I think Councillor Wood was saying about the colours. So I'm getting feedback that actually for people that are colourblind, they're struggling quite a lot with both the yellow and green on the city centre, but also on some of the red and green on the bigger maps. So I don't know if there's a way we could get a different contrast done for people with colour blindness. I mean, my colleague in CamCycle, who's our infrastructure campaigner, he can't tell the difference between the yellow and the green on the city centre map, which was a bit of a struggle. And then finally, just to go back to my original question, I mean, I appreciate what the GCP are doing in terms of engagement, and they've supplied CamCycle with some leaflets and things that we can give out. I'll be at the Arbory Carnival, my colleague will be at Chesterton Festival. and we'll put some things on social media, but clearly we've got a particular angle on it, and it's just a plea really to all the councillors in the room to kind of also engage in social media and directly with residents to try and bring this vision to life and talk through the different angles, because I know from the people, sort of members of the general public I've spoken to, is much of it they still find quite confusing. So it's just sort of the more we can talk about it in the different angles, the better. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Scott, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, yeah, I beg your pardon. I was talking away avidly. I was just remarking that Jane Grant has her hand up, so I think she has a response to Anna Williams. Perhaps if we come to Councillor Martin Smart first, and then we'll come back to Richard Preston and Jane Grant. Thanks, Martin.
Yep, thanks, Chair. I think Anna was talking a lot of sense there, so I agree with all of that. And Richard, you're giving really good input, so thank you for that. So my main point is, in terms of rejigging the road system in Cambridge, is there any plan to have a look at the allocation of space on public highways as a part of that? I mean, I know there will be some of that anyway in terms of potential bus lanes or a cycle lane or whatever, and there's only so many things you can do with the highways, but things like trees or areas where people can sit and on chairs and tables and eat out, that kind of thing. I suppose my main interest really though is cycle lanes, because we are the biggest cycling city in the UK. It's the kind of like USP for Cambridge really. People get around on bikes. Walking is becoming more fashionable. A lot of people walk. There are pavements normally on most roads, but there aren't necessarily cycle lanes on most roads. And especially with people using other types of transportation that are really allied to bicycles, like scooters and the electric mopeds and things, there's much more of a demand for some of the space on the highway being allocated to that form of transport. And I've said those things, but I particularly mean bicycles really, because they're far healthier to use and in my opinion far better. So is there any chance of that? I mean, some time ago I talked to a cycling officer at the county, I think, or the city it was then maybe, about whether every road in Cambridge should have a cycle lane. There just should be a white line on every road which demarcates space for cycles. And I know that's sort of fairly radical, but I just feel that there should be space for cycles on pretty much every part of the public highway system, because we're Cambridge, and there's a reason for that, And just finally, my final point, Chair, is, as has been said by Councillor Ray, to a certain extent, I got a slightly different spin on it. The thing about a series of consultations, I think, Richard, is that people can get lost in that process. And so I beg you, please do take on board comments that come at the wrong time. I'm on planning committee, and I see in the planning system often there are things like outline planning permissions and then more detailed planning later on. And residents get told, oh, you're saying that at the wrong time, you should have said it then, or say it later. And people don't work that way. Whatever they want to say it right now when they think of it. And so please find a way of taking people's comments on board, and if necessary, adding them to a system later if need be. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. Now over to Jane Grant and then to Richard Preston, because I think Jane's response is to Anna Williams.
Yes, I just wanted to say, Anna, that we do have maps available for people who find it difficult to distinguish different colours. So anyone who finds it difficult, we have a monochrome map where we have dots and dashes instead of colours. Anyone who has any other problem viewing any of our maps, do please call us or email us, and we're very happy to send something out to you or send it as an attachment to an email or whatever. So please don't be put off by that. Just get in touch. Thank you. Over to you, Richard.
Yeah, I think if I can comment on Councillor Smart's comments, I think one of the things we're keen to do for each of the categories of road is to develop some key characteristics, almost like a potential menu of ideas that could be used within those particular streets. I think there is, if we get this right, there is every opportunity to reallocate highway space to a wide range of uses. Clearly, cycle movements are clearly something we want to target. But coming back to this issue of the sense of place and making sure that in the right areas people feel comfortable spending more time on the highway and interacting, I think the characteristics would set out, a palette of options for how we use that road space more effectively, certainly better than we do at the present time, and that can involve landscaping, greenscaping, seating, communal areas, as well as the focusing on the movement aspects, cycle lanes and the like. I suppose the one issue I'd push back slightly on is the issue, should every road or street have a cycle lane? Because I think it's very much down to the environment. There are certain road environments where you want to give the cyclist far more freedom to, in many ways, dominate the movement function in particular streets, and perhaps being confined in the cycle lane doesn't allow that to happen. Clearly on other routes, I think segregation through cycle lanes is an absolute given on perhaps the more busier routes, to make sure that we improve the environment and improve safety for cyclists. So I don't think it's a black and white. I think it's another one of those shades of grey issue. And in terms of making sure we follow through on comments, absolutely, we try our best to record all the issues. And I'm sure if we don't capture all those right issues, that councillors will come back to us and make sure that we do respond to all the feedback that we are receiving.
Good. Thank you, Richard Preston. Now, Councillor Smart, did you have another issue, or you've just forgotten your hand?
I just forgot my hand, sorry, Chair.
Okay, that's fine. Now, we do have one final one from Councillor Sam Carling, and then we'll come to the public question forum, because it's now after almost 15 minutes past 9. So, Councillor Carling.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will be very quick. I kind of just wanted to stress the importance of having accessibility arrangements in place without people necessarily having to ask. So we've raised the idea of some people being colourblind and being unable to interpret the coloured map very well. But rather than us having to kind of specifically direct those people to get the monochrome map, it would be good to just have it available on the website more easily. And just, have these things available from the start, so it's a lot easier and people don't have to go through the effort and the difficulties of contacting somebody to get that. And I think we do need to look at better distribution of the consultation. We need to make sure people know about it, more things in public places, libraries, for example, I think somebody said in the chat. My specific question, and I'm sorry if this has already come up and I've missed it, is just which classes of roads specifically might be eligible for modal filters sort of going forward? Because I know you've said that, although we're not dealing with the specific locations of modal filters at this stage, it's about the road classification. Obviously, that will then impact where we can put modal filters. So I don't know if you just mind clarifying that. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, Richard Preston, thanks.
In terms of those accessibility issues, I'm sure my colleague Jane Grant is taking that on board, and she will feed it back to her colleagues in the communications team. In terms of which roads could have modal filters on, well, when you look at the map, we've identified at this stage what we believe would be appropriate area access and local access streets, and they will be the routes that would have some form of filtering on them potentially. Of course, this is our first take on this. There may be suggestions that we get that would mean other routes are added as access streets, or it might mean that some that we've identified people don't feel are appropriate at this stage. So we're very open to suggestions on how that map needs to change in terms of any changes to status, any deletions, any additions.
I'm working, love. No, thanks.
Carla, I think your microphone's open.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
The dog just decided to attack me, sorry.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard.
So, please, if you've got ideas, suggestions on how that map needs to change, by all means, let us know.
Thanks so much. Well, thank you very much, Richard Preston, and thank you, Jane Grant, for being here this evening. We all appreciate very much the time that you've taken to answer our questions, and I'm sure that there will be lots of responses to the questionnaires in the various forms that they're being produced. And I would like to emphasise the libraries too. Libraries have always been used by residents as places to receive consultations, and they're well and truly open for business now, so that would be appreciated. But thank you both. Thank you. Good. And so now we'll move to our public question time. And there are two public questions on that we've had on notice. And there's one, I'm just finding them here. There's one from Susan Grossi, and her question is, are there any plans to properly address the problems with traffic and nuisance motorised vehicles in the town centre create? For example, by reinstating and properly policing the rising bollards, and by encouraging a police presence to curtail the domination of the central triangle, namely Trinity Street, Market Hill and Sydney Street, by food delivery two-wheelers going in all directions and parking on pavements. Susan Grossi says that she is asking because she was recently in Dion, which has taken a much more robust approach to their centralised pedestrianised area, and it is such a joy to walk and to cycle in a city like that. So we're taking that question on board, and we will relay it to West Central Committee, where it can be asked there and responded to, because West Central Committee, of course, has on it the city market councillors, the relevant councillors to this question. But I did just want to comment on the rising bollards, because I do know from my experience as a county councillor that the rising bollards were removed because of the expense of keeping them operative. That was actually an issue that arose at Highways Committee when I was on the Highways Committee. But that doesn't mean, of course, that they can't be brought back, and that question will be put to the West Central Committee. There's also a question from Nin Bickerton, and I'm not sure if Nin is with us, but I don't see her in the list of the list of attendees, so I'll read it. Nin Bickerton would like to discuss the unauthorised traveller encampment on Carisbrook Road and what steps are being taken to remove this encampment and how to prevent this occurring in the future. Now, this is the green space that's next door to Mayfield School. It's in the McManus estate, and I do have a response to that question from the city officers. This is a decision note on the unlawful encampment at Carisbrook Road, and the decision note is dated the 12th of May of 2022. There is currently an unauthorised encampment on land near Mayfield School on Carisbrook Road that arrived on the 25th of April, consisting of 4 caravans and 7 vehicles, and a map has been provided. We'll provide this response to Nin Bickerton. We, that is the City Council, have clarified ownership of the land with the Land Registry, and the City Council inquiries are now exhausted and leading to a position where the land is bona vacantia. That means it's empty of ownership. From the register, we have been able to contact the firm of W.H. Cork, Gully and Co. of Guildhouse, 81 to 87 Gresham Street, London, EC, who were appointed the liquidator of Orchard House Properties Limited, 17th of February, 1981. W.H. Cork, Gully and Co. have referred us to PricewaterhouseCoopers of Leeds. After a referral from PricewaterhouseCoopers to the Crown Estates, the Treasury Solicitor as nominee for the Crown has issued a notice of disclaimer under section 1013 of the Companies Act of 2006, and the land is therefore declared bona vacantia. And so that means that it's vacant land, and the council has maintained the land with the oldest record being 1993. The council has installed a bin on this land and continues to empty it. The council has an interest in this land, having maintained it for a period of over 29 years. There have been over 15 reported incidents relating to this encampment from local residents, including late night parties, urination and defecation in the shrubbery, loose dogs, litter, fly tipping, loss of access to open space. The North Area Police Sergeant has also made contact with Streets and Open Space to discuss their concerns. The recommendation is therefore to enforce to remove the unauthorised encampment. The levels of antisocial behaviour and impact on local people are considered justification to warrant the use of Section 77 to 78 of the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act of 1994. There is no legal reason why the City cannot take Section 77 and Section 78 action in respect of this land. This power is used by the Council, and Section 77 gives the Council power to direct individuals to remove vehicles and belongings and leave the land occupied without consent of the occupier of the land, including land owned and/or occupied privately. Before issuing this direction, welfare assessments must be carried out on the occupiers of the unauthorised site. Occasionally, there is a medical or other concern, which means it would be inappropriate for occupants to be moved on, and we would need, that is the City Council would need, to complete a welfare assessment to ensure the City Council's actions are reasonable and proportionate. A direction under Section 77 will be issued immediately after having received information regarding occupation of the site from the enforcement team, and failure to comply with the direction or returning within 3 months constitutes a criminal offence with a penalty of a fine of up to £1,000. The direction requires the Head of Legal Services approval and the site to be vacated within a determined period, usually 24 hours, and if it hasn't been complied with after 24 hours, a summons serviced by bailiffs will be issued for the occupants to attend court. At court, an application for an order under Section 78 will be made. If granted, the order is served by bailiffs, and the guidance suggests 24 hours between service and enforcement. If they fail to do so, bailiffs with tow trucks are instructed to attend the site to clear it. In many cases, this process can be completed in as little as 41 days, but can take much longer due to the specific circumstances of the occupiers of the encampment of available resources. And there is a brief footnote to this memorandum. The police have powers, but only if there are 6 or more vehicles and damage has been caused to the land or property and threatening, abusive or insulting words have been used. And so this is contained in the guidance note. Thank you for indulgence in allowing me to read that, but I thought that it was very important I do so. And I would just like to add that in regard to travellers and Romani people, the City Council does have very real concerns in terms of their right to have space which they can occupy lawfully and legally. And our current Executive Councillor Mairead Healy has responsibility in this regard, in that she has made a commitment that in her role as Executive Council and during her period as an Executive Council, she will take active action in order to ensure that there is land available for travellers and Romani people to occupy lawfully so that they can legally have access to space. This is particularly necessary in the location of Addenbrooke's Hospital, for example, when members of the communities require healthcare, then it's important that their families and their support network is nearby. Now, I noticed that Councillor Condren, Cox Condren, who is County Councillor for Arbury, in which this area is located, would like to make a comment too. So please, Councillor Cox-Condren.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. And I can see that Mike's also got his hand up, so I'll be quite brief because he's probably going to elaborate on what I'm going to say too. So firstly, both addressing it from both directions, the issue, and in my role, as I said, as Vice Chair of Communities, Social Mobility and Inclusion, I'm also working closely with Mairead County and City are collaborating to work to ensure that there are traveller stops, Gypsy and traveller stops, which is that's a very important issue. Secondly, as City and County Councillors, we have been also liaising with officers, and we'll be back talking door to door in the area and with the school, and looking finding some creative solutions that may deter parking in that area, and working with residents to create that. And Mike, I think that you're probably going to mention that, aren't you? So I'll pass on there, Joss, as well, please. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Councillor Cox-Condren. Councillor Todd Jones.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, Hilary, you've actually said a number of things I was going to say anyway. But the memorandum, as Jocelyn called it, that she read out, things have moved on a little, because my understanding, certainly when I last checked the site just over a week ago, is that the travellers had moved on. And obviously the council followed due process and acted as sensitively as they can in these situations, and ultimately are able to, even though the land is not in the ownership of the city council, they can still use their enforcement powers under due process to eventually move travellers on from an unauthorised encampment. As Hilary said, we're going to work closely with city council officers, certainly officers in the public realm team, to look at what can be done with this site, whether there's anything that we ought to consider, take advice, bearing in mind that the fundamental issue, as Councillor Cox-Condren mentioned, is that we need to find traveller sites which these people can use much more appropriately, and that I believe the first draft of the Gypsy and Travellers Housing Needs Assessment is now being reviewed, and I really hope that that will lead to actual provision of traveller sites in the future. So that's a little brief update, and I believe there were residents in the meeting who were interested in this item but have now left, and I think the person who answered the question has now left, but hopefully this, well, I'm happy to communicate this to them if I can be provided with some contact details. Thanks so much.
Good. Now, we're almost at the end, but I can see there are two more hands up. And I just want to say that I was very pleased as County Councillor for Arbury, with responsibility in relation to this matter, to work with Mrs. Rodenblad, and also with one of the city councillors who was at that time responsible for this area, Councillor Shaney Payne, to endeavour to secure planter boxes so that the residents could be engaged in biodiversity issues and planting and upkeep of plants in the area, because it is a beautiful small space, grass space, and with lovely trees and one seat. I think we could have more seats there, but that's up to the councillors clearly for Arbury City and County. But over to you, Lillian Rundblad, if we could have your comment, and then Councillor Bird as well. And I do just want to add that I do hope that attention will be paid in this regard to the space that is near the children's play area in Arbury, near Arbury Court, because it's come to our attention that there are occasional encampments of travellers there, and we too from the West Chesterton, this borders on West Chesterton, we want the travellers and Romany people to have proper spaces that they can occupy lawfully, so that there is no need for them occupying these other spaces. But we want the arbory space to be put on board too, onto the list. So yes, over to you, Lillian Rundblad.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor. We are grateful that we had all the help to clear the space. The HRR have a working group for the Mayfield Green, together with the Mayfield seniors, and we are also taking contacts with the school to the creative nature group to start planning for an application through help of the officers at the Matthew McGrath's group to send in an EIP as soon as possible. And it will then be work for the local residents to participate in decisions on what should be done and what could we do to help service the area as well. As Mayfield seniors already have their planters, and we do have watering works, and we do have other kinds of enhancement of the area. It was also once discussed that it could maybe make more of a playground in the earlier discussions with Councillor Scott, and that is also come up again. And the LHI for planters were denied us last year through the highways. Plus, we had the submission then through Chini Payne and Councillor Scott as well. It is an ongoing project, and I'd be very much appreciating if other people will also come and work with us from other areas. I know a lot of the school children's parents are interested.
Good. Thanks so much, Mrs. Rundblad. Thank you. And now to Councillor Jerry Bird. Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks, Chair. Really just getting back on the GRT, Gypsy Romeo Travellers. There's a lot of us working on that. Mairead, Carla, myself, Hilary. We're also getting South Cams involved to try and find a permanent site for the travellers, because we've been trying for many years to get one, and they have a right to live peacefully as well. And most of them that actually come to visit Cambridge come to take family members to Addenbrooke's. So really we need a site that side of town, so they're near to the hospital so they can get the treatment they need. This is a very serious issue. I feel like they've been discriminated for many, many years, and we as a city need to make sure that we help these people who desperately need it. So yes, we are working very hard to try and find a site, and as soon as we've got information about one, then we will come back to North Area and tell you. Thank you, Jocelyn.
Good. Thanks, Councillor Bird. That's much appreciated. And I believe that there was originally an agreement some time ago with for land in South Cambridgeshire, but for some reason this didn't ever come to fruition. So thank you so much, everybody, for attending, councillors, officers in particular, and residents most particularly. And I would just like to advertise, it's been mentioned already, the Arbory Carnival or Arbory Festival, which I believe is taking place this Saturday. That's the 11th of June. And so everybody welcome to that, and also to Arbory Library, because they will be having a book sale on that day as well as a part of the Arbory Festival. And just to conclude, I'd like to say that one of the issues that's interested me is that we have so many residents who are engaged in so many interesting activities. We've got musicians in groups, we've got the Friends of the Arbory Library, the Friends of the Milton Road Library, we've got people who are musicians, as I said, we've got book groups, I'm sure, and we have sustainable food interest. We have Resettle Chesterton, which is a group that's setting up a house in Hurst Park Estate for Syrian refugees. We've got people who are concerned about the environment. So I'm suggesting that at North Area Committee, we begin to invite our residents to come and talk to us, to tell us what they're doing, to tell us what they're up to, so that they can, in effect, advertise their wares and get this advertisement out there in the community, so then the community will know that there are musicians and that there are musicians groups that they might like to join, that there's a book group and what books they're reading, and community members might like to join, because I often think that the members of the community are engaged in so many interesting activities that we do not know about, and I for one would really love to know what our residents are up to if they're prepared to come and tell us. So I think that if we could do that, that would be really wonderful. And now I just have a message from Councillor Gawthorpe Wood that Cambridge Mayor, Councillor Mark Ashton, will attend the carnival, the Arbury Carnival, on Saturday the 11th, and the parade around the area will arrive at midday. So let's hope that everyone on this call and everybody who learns about it from this call and everybody who knows about it from any other direction whatsoever will be at midday when the carnival arrives at the space in just off just off Arbury Road, near the community centre. But thank you very much, everybody, for attending, and we'll now sign off from North Area Committee.
Can I just give a quick shout out?
Yes.
For Brownsfield, is that okay? For
Absolutely.
Brownsfield Community Centre for the 24th of June on Friday. It's in East Chesterton, well, it's across Chesterton and King's Edges and Albury. People will attend. There's children's activities, but there's live bands, and it's on from 6 till 10 p.m. And it's at Brownsfield Community Centre.
Good. Thank you,
and it's run by Chips, and it's live bands, and it goes into what we were talking about, Councillor Scott, in terms of maybe you mentioned a hub of some sort, a social, like, artist hub. We'll talk about that offline, but the idea is there and you made it, so thank you.
Thanks so much, Councillor McQueen. Yes, and I'll just add that one of Councillor McQueen's children plays guitar and has a duo with a friend who plays the drums, and it seemed to me that we could actually ask musician group. We've got Councillor Patrick Shield, who's a musician, a singer in a band, along too, in terms of telling us here in the community what is happening out there and how people could become engaged. But let's sign off until the next time. Thank you. Thank you.